I grew up an only child, just me and my mom. She had me at an early age, 19.
In the 1980s, Monty Smith is an only child, growing up in Okmulgee, Oklahoma. His dad is not present in his life, so his mom is everything to Monty.
She was about 5'1", little woman, but she was spicy. Straight to the point with me. She's like, I'm not gonna let you grow up be a bad kid. I'm gonna be telling you what's right and wrong. She was good at that.
He was very close to his mom. That was his rock. I have childhood memories of Monty and I, playing in the backyard while our mothers were inside, doing their thing.
Monty's mother is in ill health for most of his childhood with kidney disease.
My mom was on dialysis for my whole life. 3 days a week, we had to go to the hospital, and for 8 hours at a time for her to do dialysis. She was a very strong woman, though. She still, was able to hold a job down, too.
He was going to school. He was at home, making sure his mom had what she needed or they needed. He definitely had to grow up a lot faster than the rest of us.
Whenever Monty gets the chance, he heads to the basketball court with his best friend, Jermaine.
Basketball was a big thing, so we played basketball nonstop. Everybody wanted to be the star player, the most popular.
We always had a ball in our hand. For Monty, it was strictly basketball. He was a very good basketball player.
After graduating from high school, Monty attends college, but he and Jermaine still have time to play ball. This is how they meet Monty's first love, Tabitha Lynch, in 1993.
Tabitha and Monty grew close very quickly. The way that they looked at each other, I could tell that was his first love.
We were a magnet towards each other. I did kind of feel like I, was a lucky guy because we just always had a good time together no matter what we did. There was never any arguing, just had fun all the time.
After dating for 3 years, Monty and Tabitha eventually drift apart.
She was in college playing basketball, and so was I. She was at a different school, so we didn't get to see each other a lot.
I know life happens, but I would have definitely liked to have seen them stay together back in those days. That was definitely the one that got away from Monty.
After college, Monty becomes a mechanic and gets married. But 10 years later, as his mother's health deteriorates, so too does his marriage.
Monty, of course, wanted to be around his mother more. Definitely played a role in his relationship with his wife.
After me and my wife had split up, my mother had a stroke. And then there was, just her health just went quickly.
It took a rough toll, and it took a toll on him mentally.
But the day that I found out that she passed, I was on a motorcycle ride out of town. That was a hard moment, and I was crying inside my helmet. Yeah, I felt empty after my mom's gone, I was just trying to get through one day at a time and hide my emotions from everybody, I worked as much as I could. I developed this new passion for motorcycles. So I just, get on my bike and ride when I could. That was my escape.
On Halloween night in 2010, Monty's life begins looking up when he attends a party at a local club.
So we walk in, there was a lot of good costumes there. I was standing there and someone just kind of grabbed me by my shirt, and before I could get a chance to see what was happening, I was being pulled onto the dance floor, and then never even faced me. She's just looking the other way and dancing with me. I didn't know what to think about her at first. I was like, that's kind of aggressive approach right there. So then that song was over, and I walked over to the stand by the bar area, and then she came with me. I said, my name's Monty. And she said, oh, my name's Shayna.
Shayna Sims is a 22-year-old hairstylist.
She was about the same height as me, and that's kind of tall for a woman. She had dark hair, pretty face. There we just kept talking. She stayed by my side for the rest of the night. That was a nice feeling to have a pretty girl like that interested in me, because I was kind of feeling down on myself a little bit, right before that happened. We went back to her house. I spent the night there with her the first night, just talking and hanging out till the sun came up.
The relationship moves quickly, and a few months later, in January 2011, they move in together.
It was never a dull moment, I'll say that. We had fun, did a lot of things together.
I remember him being excited when he told me that he had met Shayna and how he lit up when he talked about Shayna originally.
The next thing I know, we started talking about, well, maybe we should get married.
Just a few weeks later, Monty surprises Shayna with a ring.
So we're at dinner. I waited for the right moment, and then I got down on one knee. I asked her, to marry me, and she said yes. I put the ring on her finger. She just was very excited and happy.
He was all in on this relationship, and this is what he wanted. She seemed to be feeling the same way, so I was very supportive.
We had decided to get married at the Tulsa Historical Society. She did all the prep work herself, which I was kind of amazed by that. I was really nervous, but from the moment that I seen her come out, and I seen that smile on her face, it felt right. Everybody was encouraging to us. It was a great day.
He wanted to be the husband and the father and the family man that he never had. So he very much looked forward to that.
I had came home from work one day and she had this smile on her face. And I'm like, what are you smiling about? So I think I remember her saying, come here, I want to show you something. So she showed me the pregnancy test. It showed positive and I felt happy, excited to be a dad.
As an expectant father, Monty is fully invested in Shayna having a healthy pregnancy. So he is surprised and concerned one day when he becomes aware of a potential problem.
We had a doctor's appointment, just normal routine. The doctors came into the room and told us they did not support my mother taking pain medication during pregnancy.
Shayna, who had been complaining of leg pain, has been self-medicating for months with Percocet and Lortabs, both highly addictive opioids.
She went to a pain specialist doctor, and I was unaware of this. So I was at work at this time, so I'm pretty sure that she did not tell them that she was pregnant, and they proceeded to help her with her pain level.
Her obstetrician has become aware of Shayna's drug use through routine lab tests.
They could not help her anymore, that she needed to look for another doctor to help deliver her baby. I was furious. I can't believe that you could endanger your child like that. I found the medication in her purse, confronted her. I said, you're not taking any more of these right now because I'm taking them from you. So you can't have these anymore.
Monty's daughter is born 6 months later.
She came out, she heard my voice and stopped crying and opened her eyes and looked for me. At that moment, our bond was created. She's healthy, no problems whatsoever. I was very happy about that, and that the things that her mom had done early on did not affect her. Shayna seemed happy to be a new mom again to this pretty little girl. At that point, we had a good relationship pretty much. After my daughter was just a few months old, I switched to night shift on my job. So 3 in the evenings till midnight, working hard to provide as much as I can for my family since I'm the only one working right now.
While Monty works, he believes his baby daughter is tucked safely in bed during his shift. But he is wrong.
I would come home at midnight. I would notice that she's just getting home right when I am and bringing my daughter in the house, out of the car seat. She hadn't been home all evening long. She just said, I'm out running errands. It's okay. She said, I don't see anything wrong with that. I told her that she shouldn't be out with my daughter all evening long, that she needed to be home in the bed. I started to become more aggravated. We had a lot of arguments.
One night, Monty arrives home to find Shayna in bed, although she's not quite alone.
She's passed out. Her phone is laying face up on the bed and is on FaceTime with some other young man that I do not know. Couldn't believe it.
And I started seeing the signs from Shayna that maybe she wasn't the person that she's seeming to be. She became very evil very quickly.
Monty Smith has just found his wife Shayna in bed and on FaceTime with another man.
I look at the phone, she's passed out, unaware that I'm even right there looking at her phone. No clue. A lot of things went through my mind. But number one was, how could you? My daughter's right there in the other room. The next day, I brought it up and talked to her about it. And she said, well, I don't remember that. Denial.
Monty did mention a lot that Shayna would just lie about nothing, lie to be lying.
I was pretty upset, pretty angry. At this point, the trust is gone.
When I hear these things myself, I'm thinking, Monty, you got to do something about this before it gets worse.
And indeed, things do get worse.
One day we have an argument. She's, not letting me go out the door. I said, I have to go to work. Excuse me, move out of my way. And then she says, no, you're not going to touch me. If you do, you're going to go to jail. And I said, what do you mean by that?
This is when Shayna reveals just how low she will sink to get her own way.
She's like, well, because you're black. And they're going to take you to jail before they would me. After her saying that to me, I was really, really done. And I wanted to just leave.
They do have a daughter together. That was the main reason for Monty wanting to stay. He wanted to not have a broken home. So he made his decisions to stay.
Soon, Shayna's erratic behavior escalates outside the home.
Monty had taken Shayna to go tan. He stayed outside in the car with the baby.
Unbeknownst to Monty, while inside, Shayna overreacts to something trivial and flies off the handle.
While he was sitting in the car with the baby, 2 police cars pulled up outside the tanning salon. He said, hey man, I think something's happening. And yeah, she was having a scene inside the tanning salon, ended up, cursing out some ladies that worked there and make all the cops, and, they eventually, kicked her out. It was at that point I told him, I said, hey man, I love you, brother, but you need to figure this out.
I had friends that I had confided in about my problems at home. They just kind of let me know how messed up the situation was that I was in and what am I going to do next.
Around November 2014, an ex-girlfriend reaches out to Monty on social media. Her name is Christina Perez.
We had said hello to each other on Facebook. I think she may have asked, what my situation was, and probably told her, I was unhappy.
Monty and Christina do not meet in person, but continue to chat occasionally online until Shayna finds out.
So I came home from work one day, and Shayna asked me who this Christina girl was, and I was like, oh gosh, here we go.
Shayna thought that Christina was the enemy and was trying to take her man.
She was mad about this situation that she thought was going on, so I am accused of having an affair with Christina.
The situation escalates when Shayna tracks down Christina's home and her place of work.
She's showing up at Christina's job, sitting outside, and it's getting more and more aggressive, their tone every day.
And then it blew up from there.
One day when I got home from work, they were talking to each other, and I could hear Christina on speakerphone saying, "I know what you did to my car, and I'm calling the police." Shayna had slashed Christina's tires. I mean, I'm blown away. Thinking to myself, who is this person?
She was slashing this woman's tires. She was following this woman. She was doing all these crazy things to this woman who had dated her husband 5 years ago.
I couldn't believe it. It first started out, with Shayna acting out in public and then escalating to slashing someone's tires. What's next? At that point, I knew that Shayna was crazy.
After the tire slashing, it's just getting worse and worse each day. They're making threats towards each other at this point.
Christina doesn't retaliate, and Monty stops contacting her. But things come to a head when Shayna decides to file a protective order against Christina.
We go to the courthouse. I'm with her, me and my daughter. We're sitting in the lobby just waiting. Looked down the hallway and saw Christina.
By chance, Christina is at the courthouse as well to file a protective order against Shayna.
And of course, they gave each other mean looks. And the next thing I know, they're walking towards each other. And my wife is holding my daughter. And they wanted to exchange words with each other. And then they swung at each other. As soon as they throw punches at each other, I'm grabbing my daughter out of harm's way. My daughter's crying. It was quite intense. The deputies came out and separated everybody. They took them back in the holding areas until they figure out what happened.
And thank goodness there was tape. So the deputies pull it, and of course they see Christina is innocent, that Shayna has purposefully knocked into this woman and then starts screaming about Christina attacking her.
They realized that the child had been endangered in this encounter. So my wife was charged with child endangerment.
Shayna is put on probation for a year, and Christina is granted a protective order against her.
If I did feel trapped in this, I'm not going to call it a marriage anymore. I felt trapped in this situation. But because my daughter's involved in this, and I can't just take off.
Monty doesn't hear from Christina again. Meantime, out of the blue, a few months later, Monty gets a message from another girlfriend from his past, Tabitha Lynch, his first love.
She had contacted me through Facebook and said, "Hey, how's it going?" We chatted a little bit and then exchanged a number to talk. Her contacting me was kind of like a breath of fresh air. It was nice to hear from her and, see how she was doing in her life.
It's been over 20 years since Monty and Tabitha dated each other. Tabitha is divorced with 2 children of her own.
I didn't know all the details going on in her life at this time, but she just, told me that she had kids and they were doing good. And once she found out that I was having problems with my wife, she's like, "I'd like to reach out to her and talk to her." I just didn't think it was a good idea. I didn't know what to expect from Shayna. I was like, "No, it's okay. I got this under control. I'm gonna handle it my way." But one day after returning home from work, I walked to the door and Shayna was upset. She's like, "Tabitha has reached out to me and said that you and her have been talking and that I'm a terrible mom and a terrible wife." And so she asked me, "Who's this bitch?"
Shayna was very angry because she felt that Tabitha was a threat.
She can't stop victimizing people. I would say she is one of the most bizarre people I've ever covered in 31 years of covering crime.
Shayna was very jealous, very vindictive, very evil.
Shayna Smith is enraged when she receives a warning message from her husband Monty's former girlfriend, Tabitha Lynch.
Tabitha did send a message to Shayna, basically telling her that, she's losing the best thing that she could ever have, and she needs to change her ways before she screws it up.
Shayna took that as disrespect and did not like what she heard, because it's coming from another woman. And she asked me, are y'all messing around? And I said, no.
Shayna is determined to have it out with Tabitha face to face, but she can't seem to locate her.
She's constantly asking me where to find her at. I said, I don't know. I was kind of worried about these two women having the interaction with each other because I don't know what Shayna's capable of.
But Shayna never gets the chance to confront Tabitha because one day, Tabitha suddenly becomes critically ill.
Tabitha had started having some health issues, and eventually she went into the hospital and didn't make it out.
2 months after reconnecting with Monty, Tabitha dies unexpectedly from natural causes.
Tabitha was like a sister to me, so it hurt me deeply.
I was like, I can't believe it. It seemed like I just talked to her just the other day and everything was fine.
Monty consoles himself that at least she's out of harm's way from Shayna.
I told Shayna that Tabitha passed away. She acted cold and heartless. She didn't care. The next words out of her mouth were, well, good. That's what that bitch gets. My jaw hit the floor. I couldn't believe it. I just heard her say that about Tabitha's death. I was already emotionally removed. I was ready to be physically removed. I didn't want to know her anymore.
The viewing for Tabitha Lynch is held in April of 2015 at a funeral chapel in East Tulsa.
I was there Thursday afternoon, probably between 1 and 2 o'clock. It hurt my heart. It was like a member of my family had passed away.
As the viewing ends, the family is taking a break outside when a stranger slips inside, presumably to pay her last respects.
Tabitha's mother happens to see this woman who looks like she's going and actually reaching into the casket. Something seems odd. It's reported to other family members. That woman is now gone, but the family goes to inspect Tabitha's body, and clearly her body has been touched. She's got a straight, cut right from the top of her head, right close to the bridge of her nose.
Her hair's been cut, and then her pants have been pulled down, her outfit has been pulled down. Her shoes that were specially made just for her that were in her casket, they're now gone. Everybody, they're just in shock. You realize that some crazy woman has come in here and desecrated this body.
Here you've got just absolute pandemonium unfolding. It's just, you can't put into words how devastating that was for this victim's family to just see.
There is one thing that we always hold sacred in this country, and that is how you treat a person who's passed away. And this just violated every tenet of that for sure.
Tabitha's family place a call to the police.
This is never a call you ever get, ever. I mean, it just gets crazier from there.
And so the officers at that time, when they got there, they see Tabitha, they see a disheveled body lying in a casket. They see that the makeup is messed up. They see that the incision on her face. And those are all really unusual things. Those are things that should not have happened and that the officers were shocked to see. It feels like the crime was a personal attack on this person. They start taking photographs, they start collecting evidence, looking around, looking at the body, making observations.
And down next to the casket, there's hair. Tabitha's hair has been cut, and there's some of the hair laying on the ground.
While police are processing the crime scene at the funeral home, another call is placed to dispatch from Tabitha's family, who are now at her apartment.
They learned that the suspect may possibly be at the apartment.
They're reporting, we think this person who was just down at the funeral home is over at our house, and we need to get somebody over here right now.
Hours earlier, Monty Smith receives a disturbing message from Shayna.
I opened it up and looked at it, and It was a picture of Tabitha in her casket. I was very shocked to see her with this picture. I didn't understand why. Why do you have this picture? You know, where did you get this from? And then she also said, that bitch looks ugly in her casket. I can't believe you're messing with her. I was confused. I didn't know what she meant by that.
Once Monty finds out what Shayna has done, his life will never be the same.
It's beyond me, you know, why she would do what she did.
I've seen a lot of strange cases in my 31 years, and this one takes the cake. So many twists and turns along the way, and then it became frightening and more bizarre. It just became crazy.
After receiving the pictures from Shayna, Monty Smith returns home to find her in a frenzied state.
Shayna says, take your daughter out of the car and grab her car seat too. After I took my daughter out, she drove off. That left me and my daughter sitting there. This was probably about 5:30 in the evening. Had no clue where she was going.
It's 7:30 p.m. when police arrive at Tabitha's apartment.
They meet a bunch of Tabitha's family outside in the parking lot. And at that point, Tabitha's family tells them, there's someone inside our apartment and we didn't invite her in.
It's a heightened level of tension for the family members. It's like she's inside.
They learned that this woman had showed up at the door of Tabitha Lynch's apartment. She says, my name's Stephanie, and I'm here because something happened to your mother's makeup at the funeral home.
The woman claims she wanted a photo of Tabitha in order to fix her makeup.
And so she makes up this ruse to get inside the apartment, and at some point, the family kind of gets suspicious. So the police go inside the apartment, and what they find is this disheveled, jittery-looking woman who appears out of place. She doesn't seem like she belongs there.
Police search the suspect and discover incriminating evidence.
They find a knife and a box cutter in her pockets. They find some hair in her pocket. And so it was apparent to them at that point that this person was related to what had happened at the funeral home. A few of the family members recognized this girl who identified herself as Stephanie as actually Shayna Sims. And when they start talking to police officers, they tell them that Shayna is actually the wife of Monty Smith, and Monty is a longtime friend of Tabitha Lynch.
Monty is putting his daughter to bed when his phone rings.
It was Shayna. Her voice was shaky. She's telling me, come save her. Then the next thing, I heard voices in the background, and she was telling them to stop and let her go. And they said, no, you're not going anywhere. And I was like, who's that in the background? What are you talking about? And she said, I'm at your dead bitch's house. You can't be. What do you mean? So I got my daughter up and I drove to Tabitha's home. As I'm driving over there, I'm still trying to wrap my head around what all just happened. And then once I arrived there, it was already chaos at that point. They have Shayna in the police car. As soon as they open the car door, she's trying to tell me that she's being accused of messing with Tabitha's body and that they're saying that she's, stole some stuff from them. She did not. That's why I told them to close the door. I didn't want to hear anymore.
Police believe Shayna wanted to break into Tabitha's apartment to steal a personal item she could keep as a trophy. The next day, the Tulsa media seizes on the story.
We immediately went to the scene to try to figure out what on earth was happening. And just what we learned that day, nobody in their right mind would go into a funeral home and do these terrible things to someone who's already passed away. Because what threat are they at that point?
Shayna's act of desecration is so unusual that police are hard-pressed to find the correct laws with which to charge her.
They initially charged her with burglary because she had entered the apartment under false pretenses. They charged her with illegal dissection because that was essentially the closest thing they could find to coming up with that cut on Tabitha's face.
They told me what she was being charged with, and I'm blown away. 100% total shock.
That is a whole new level of crazy. It's way beyond anything that I could ever imagine someone doing.
It seems impossible, but things actually get crazier.
My sergeant came in and said, "Hey, I got a message from the funeral home that we need to go out and take a look at the body again." I grabbed one of my detective partners and my sergeant, and we went out there. So when we examined the body, we found that Tabitha's breasts had been crudely cut out of her body. We also noticed that one of her toes was missing. I had, at that point, worked hundreds of homicides as a crime scene detective, and I had not ever seen anything like this.
The investigators talk with Monty, who shows them the photographs that Shayna had texted him the previous day. They are the equivalent of a smoking gun.
So I see a hand holding a knife next to a toe. I recognize that as probably Tabitha's foot. And I see there's photographs of a hand next to what I assume to be Tabitha's genitalia. And I realize that I'm looking at photographs of Shayna in the act, committing these heinous acts at the funeral home.
I was disturbed, kind of, heartbroken. Couldn't believe that she did this to someone that I knew and that had passed away. A total disrespect.
How are you going to explain those photos? I mean, that just kind of seals her fate. Pictures of what she's actually doing.
When the case goes to trial in April 2016, Shayna is charged with 3 misdemeanors and 2 felonies.
A woman accused of slashing the body of her husband's former girlfriend is expected in court today.
This is a case that is revenge. This is the ex getting involved with her husband, and so she's going to do something about that.
I don't remember any emotion from Shayna. The defense had tried very early on in the process to say she wasn't competent to stand trial because she's got, mental issues, but she was given a thorough exam. That was part of her pre-trial process, and she was found competent to stand trial. The defense were like, look, she's just a woman pushed over the edge like any woman would be. Her husband's having an affair, the victim is texting her and rubbing her face in it. What else would a woman do?
The prosecution call a number of witnesses, including Monty.
Seeing Shayna in the courtroom and being asked questions, and she's staring at me, trying to intimidate me. I answer the questions and try to get through it.
And then the jury goes out. It's right before lunchtime. It's like 11:45 in the morning. And I didn't think it would take too long. So 3 hours later, almost to the minute, they called us back in the courtroom, and that's when the verdict was read.
They found her guilty of all the counts. All those counts were ordered to run consecutive. It all totaled up to 16 total years.
I guess you could say I felt a kind of peace.
Monty divorces Shayna a year later and gets full custody of their daughter.
I can't imagine, what he had to go through, what he had to tell his daughter, all the ramifications of that. That's tough.
Less than 4 years into Shayna's sentence, a new law is struck in Oklahoma that gives her a loophole to appeal.
Shayna Sims has been released from prison after serving 4 years of her sentence.
I was like, she can't be. There's no way. I couldn't believe it. I was in shock.
It was just a gut punch to everybody.
It was devastating to me when I found out. I felt rage at that point. I couldn't believe it.
In November 2021, Monty Smith's ex-wife Shayna Sims is set free, less than 4 years into a 16-year sentence for desecrating Tabitha Lynch's body.
I was like, she can't be. There's no way. But sure enough, I did get confirmation message later that day that she was released. I actually saw a video of her being released.
She just gets to walk. She spends a few years in prison for all the damage she's caused, and she gets to walk.
You couldn't ask for a more devastating blow to the victim's family.
It was a shock It was really a kick in the gut that we learned that she was going to be walking free after we put this case together. And to have someone walking free was tough to swallow.
Shayna has been released on appeal as a result of a Supreme Court ruling known as the McGirt decision.
The McGirt decision, in essence, basically told Oklahoma if somebody was a Native American, either as a defendant or as a victim, that the state of Oklahoma had no jurisdiction to handle those prosecutions.
The United States Supreme Court said that the state of Oklahoma can't arrest Native Americans. Our prosecutors can't prosecute crimes involving Native Americans. And so that brought into question thousands and thousands of cases over the years where a Native American was either a victim or a suspect.
This new law is supposed to protect Native Americans.
But what did Shayna Sims do? She figured out that Tabitha had Native American blood in her. You can't prosecute me for this crime. And literally, she got her case dismissed because of that McGirt decision. Shayna Sims, somebody has zero Native American blood in her, gets the benefit of victimizing somebody who was a Native American and walks around as though she's got no consequences. It's just so upsetting.
Once Shayna is out of jail, she can't seem to stay out of trouble.
Monty was worried about what she might do. Of course, the victim's family, Tabitha's family, was really worried and stressed about what she might do or who she might target. She gets arrested for stealing a car, then gets in trouble for assaulting her mother. It's just one thing after another. Monty's big concern was protecting his daughter, because now that she's free, what would stop her from trying to get custody?
I got a phone call from Shayna wanting to speak with her daughter. I did not know, I couldn't believe it. I was in shock. I ignored it for the first few days. She kept calling.
He didn't know what her plans were or what she was capable of doing now that she's out of jail.
Monty talks with their daughter, who tells him she wants to meet her mother. He drops her off for a weekend at her grandmother's house, where Shayna is staying.
Thought to myself, give it a try just one time and see how it goes. Shayna and her mom, they were yelling at each other and having confrontation in front of my daughter when she's not used to seeing that. And she told me herself that she didn't want to be around that, and she didn't want to see them. So I did not force her at that point to go back anymore. And that's where we are to this current day.
Monty still has full custody of his daughter. So yes, he, was doing his best to keep his daughter safe, to keep Shayna away.
Despite being warned about not going anywhere near Tabitha's relatives, Shayna defies the order.
And then, sure enough, Shayna then goes to the victim's family's apartment, and she's like, oh, I wasn't there to see them, which is a lie. You're only there to harass that poor family who's already been through so much. All you have to do to stay out of jail is stay over in your county. But she can't help herself again. She comes over here, and of course, that puts the family in terror. They are afraid of why she keeps showing up there and what she might do. And so, of course, yes, she's arrested and put back in.
Recognizing that Shayna is still a threat, Oklahoma state prosecutors file an appeal.
We had another case. It was called Castro Huerta, which was somebody who was clearly not a Native American, who had victimized children who were Native American. And we took that fact pattern back up to the United States Supreme Court and asked them to revisit, in essence, the McGirt decision. So then we immediately took that decision, petitioned the court, got her dismissal set aside, and remanded Shayna Sims back to prison, which is where she's at today.
In February 2023, Shayna's sentence and conviction are reinstated, and she is sent back to prison to serve the remaining 12 years.
So it's definitely a relief, for all of us that she's back in jail. Me personally, I don't think 16 years is long enough.
I'm at peace in my life. My daughter's at peace. She's happy. I've never let this be a problem for her.
Monty has this smile that whenever he's in good spirits, and it shows. He just glows. And I love to see my brother when he's happy and when everything is going good.
I feel like after all this is said and done, it's like looking at the damage after a tornado or after a disaster, and how are you going to put your life back together after this?
I don't know of any person that could have withstanded what he had to go through, especially these past 6 or 7 years. But he did it. I always love him for that.
I'm still in the stages of putting my life back together and moving forward. But it's built me to be a stronger person and better dad.
There is a stretch of highway in the American South that carries the weight of an unimaginable darkness. If you were to drive down Interstate 45, traveling between the sprawling, relentless urban expanse of Houston and the salty, coastal breeze of Galveston, Texas, you might not notice anything sinister. It is a vital artery of commerce and travel, a ribbon of concrete that pulses with the daily lives of thousands of commuters, families on vacation, and long-haul truckers. The landscape moving past your windows is a blur of gas stations, fast food signs, and flat, expansive terrain. But if you know where to look, and if you understand the history etched into the very soil of this region, that mundane drive transforms into a journey through one of the most terrifying geographical corridors in the history of American crime. This is the story of a place that came to be known, with chilling accuracy, as the Texas Killing Fields. To comprehend the sheer scale of the tragedy that unfolded here, we must first deeply understand the environment. We have to look closely at a very specific 25-acre patch of desolate marshland situated near Calder Road in League City, Texas. This is not a picturesque natural reserve or a peaceful sanctuary. It is a harsh, unforgiving, and deeply unsettling terrain. The physical characteristics of this land make it feel completely detached from the bustling interstate that runs dangerously close by. When you step off the pavement and into this area, you are immediately swallowed by the environment. The wild grass here does not just grow, it dominates the landscape. It shoots up thick, sharp, and extraordinarily high, easily towering over the head of a grown adult. It creates a natural, impenetrable curtain that blocks out the rest of the world. The ground beneath this grass is a treacherous, unstable mix of mud and swamp water, a marshland that shifts and breathes with the changing Texas weather. And then there is the fog. Dense, blinding fog frequently rolls in from the Gulf of Mexico, blanketing the fields in a heavy, white shroud. It obscures vision, dampens sound, and creates an atmosphere of profound, suffocating isolation. This environment, the tall grass, the sinking mud, the oppressive fog, and the desolate isolation, did not merely serve as a passive backdrop to a crime. It acted as an active participant, a silent accomplice to the unimaginable horrors that took place. For decades, spanning from the early 1970s all the way through the late 1990s, and even creeping into the years that followed with continued disappearances, this 25-acre expanse became the final resting place for those who were violently stolen from the world. It became a dumping ground, a place where the darkest impulses of humanity were hidden away beneath the soil and the swamp water. The environment was merciless to the evidence left behind. The intense, blistering Texas heat, combined with the heavy rainfall and the acidic nature of the marsh, worked quickly to degrade whatever physical clues a perpetrator might have carelessly dropped. Furthermore, the feral wildlife that roamed the desolate fields disrupted and scattered what remained. By the time anyone realized something was there, the elements had already begun their cruel work of erasing the victims from existence. The victims of the Texas Killing Fields represent a devastating, heartbreaking loss of life. We are not talking about an isolated incident or a brief, anomalous spike in violence. We are talking about a relentless, systematic decimation of over 30 women and young girls. More than 30 lives, each with their own hopes, dreams, families, and futures, were brutally extinguished and discarded in this desolate wasteland. They were daughters, sisters, mothers, and friends. They were subjected to the absolute worst of human behavior. These women and girls were violently abducted from their normal lives, subjected to horrific sexual assaults, and ultimately murdered. The cruelty of these acts is magnified exponentially by the vulnerability of those targeted. The youngest among the known victims was merely 12 years old, a child barely beginning her life, forced to endure terror that no human being should ever know, ultimately left in a forgotten, overgrown swamp. The sheer volume of victims transforms this patch of land from a mere crime scene into a mass grave of stolen futures, a haunting monument to a profound and lingering grief that has scarred the region for generations. As local investigators and federal authorities delved into the grim reality of the Calder Road area and the broader stretch of Interstate 45, they were confronted with a puzzle that defied conventional understanding. The initial assumption, naturally drawn when multiple bodies are found in a clustered geographic location with similar victim profiles, is that a single, highly prolific serial killer is at work. It is the narrative we are most accustomed to in true crime. One mastermind monster, operating in the shadows, using a specific, secret location as their personal graveyard over many years. However, the truth of the Texas killing fields is far more complex and infinitely more terrifying than the standard narrative. As the decades passed and the bodies continued to be tragically discovered, the Behavioral Analysis Unit of the Federal Bureau of Investigation became heavily involved in profiling the unknown subjects. These experts in criminal psychology and behavioral patterns looked at the totality of the circumstances. They analyzed the diverse victims, the varying methods of abduction, the different signatures of the crimes, and the specific, calculated use of the landscape. Their conclusions shattered the initial, singular theories and introduced a concept that is truly deeply unsettling. The FBI analysts determined that this 25-acre marshland was not the exclusive, guarded territory of a single mastermind. Instead, they concluded that there were at least 3, and potentially 4, completely distinct and separate serial killers or independent opportunistic murderers operating in this area over the decades. These were different men, with different twisted motives, different psychological profiles, and different methods of executing their crimes, who all independently made the exact same horrifying calculation. They all looked at the desolate, overgrown, fog-drenched marshland off Calder Road and recognized it as the perfect place to hide a body. It was a macabre, terrifying coincidence of geography and opportunity. This was not a coordinated effort among criminals. It was a convergence of pure evil in one specific location. The area had unwittingly become a shared trap, a communal dumping ground for multiple, unconnected predators who actively stalked the highways and towns of South Texas. Understanding why this horrifying phenomenon happened requires a much closer look at the geographical relationship between the interstate and the marshland. Interstate 45 is a heavily trafficked, vital corridor. It facilitates the movement of countless people every single day. For a predator, a bustling highway is a hunting ground rich with anonymity and opportunity. It offers immediate access to transient populations, stranded motorists, or vulnerable individuals walking along the shoulder late at night. A killer can easily blend into the endless stream of traffic, appearing as just another driver heading down to the coast or returning home to the city. But the true danger of Interstate 45 in this specific region is how rapidly and drastically the environment shifts. Within mere minutes, a driver can exit the crowded, well-lit highway and find themselves in a place exactly like Calder Road, an area completely devoid of streetlights, absent of witnesses, and lacking any semblance of modern civilization. The unique geography provided the absolutely perfect conditions for a repetitive predatory cycle. The killers could cruise the busy, populated areas to locate and abduct a vulnerable woman or girl, and then use the high-speed interstate to quickly transport them away from the initial scene before anyone noticed they were gone. The desolate marshlands lying just off the highway provided an immediate, hyper-secluded location to commit their horrific acts and dispose of the remains without fear of interruption. Once the deed was done, the killer could easily slip right back onto Interstate 45, seamlessly rejoining the anonymous, fast-moving flow of traffic and disappearing completely without a trace. The highway was both the hunting ground and the perfect escape vector, while the swamp acted as the silent, impenetrable vault that kept their darkest secrets. This specific combination of high accessibility and extreme physical isolation is exactly what drew multiple independent killers to the exact same spot time and time again. It was a perfect, tragic storm of environmental factors that facilitated decades of unchecked, horrific violence. The realization that there were multiple killers operating in the same geographical area created an absolute investigative nightmare for law enforcement. When a body was discovered hidden in the tall grass or submerged beneath the muddy water of the Calder Road area, detectives could not simply assume it belonged to one specific suspect's known timeline. They were forced to untangle a massive, convoluted web of overlapping jurisdictions, varying methods of operation, and differing, chaotic timelines spanning across 3 distinct decades. Every new discovery brought an agonizing wave of uncertainty. Was this particular victim the work of the killer from the 1970s? Was this the gruesome work of a new predator who had just discovered the utility of the fields in the 1980s? Or was this yet another completely unrelated, opportunistic individual who merely recognized the exact same geographic advantages as the others? The physical evidence, already severely degraded by the harsh Texas climate, the water, and the feral animals, offered agonizingly few clear answers. The mud of the killing fields held on to its secrets tightly, stubbornly refusing to easily distinguish one monster's work from another. As we stand at the edge of this history, looking out over the vast expanse of the Texas killing fields, we must directly confront the immense weight of the unresolved trauma that saturates the soil. The tragedy here is not just found in the staggering number of lives lost, but in the agonizing, silent decades that followed each disappearance. The families of the victims were left in a cruel state of perpetual purgatory, forever haunted by the devastating knowledge of where their loved ones were eventually found, but completely deprived of the crucial knowledge of exactly who put them there and why. The tall grass swaying in the coastal breeze, the thick fog rolling across the highway, and the dark, muddy waters of the marsh serve as constant, painful reminders of the vulnerable lives that violently intersected with unspeakable cruelty. The story of Calder Road is a stark and harrowing testament to the profound darkness that can take root in the neglected, overgrown corners of our world. It is a darkness that was allowed to flourish and multiply not by one uniquely evil individual, but by a tragic alignment of geography, opportunity, and the terrifying presence of multiple predators drawn to the very same desolate abyss. As we prepare to delve deeper into the specific lives that were stolen, the heartbreaking stories of the victims, and the grueling, heart-wrenching decades of investigation that followed their discoveries, we must carry with us the somber, heavy reality of this environment. We must constantly remember that long before this area was famously known as a sprawling crime scene, it was simply a field. And it was the calculated actions of men, multiple, distinct men, operating comfortably in the shadows of a bustling American highway, that transformed it into a permanent monument of sorrow and one of the most chilling, enduring enigmas in the history of true crime. To understand the true tragedy of the Texas killing fields, we must look beyond the geography and focus on the human lives that were irrevocably shattered upon that forsaken ground. We must step back in time to the early and mid-1980s, a period that defined the atmosphere of League City and the surrounding communities nestled along the Interstate 45 corridor. This was an era characterized by a complex intersection of rapid suburban growth and a transient, constantly shifting population. Houston was a booming metropolis, driven by the fluctuating fortunes of the oil industry, while Galveston remained a popular coastal escape. The towns caught in between, like League City, were transitioning from quiet, rural outposts into bustling, sprawling suburbs. Families moved here seeking a sense of quiet security, affordable housing, and a safe environment to raise their children, far removed from the high crime rates of the inner city. Yet, the proximity to the interstate meant that this idealized suburban life existed right on the edge of a massive, anonymous thoroughfare. Thousands of strangers passed through their backyards every single day. This dichotomy created a false sense of safety. Residents believed they were shielded from the harsh realities of the world, unaware that the highway brought a constant stream of potential danger directly to their doorsteps. The women and girls who would eventually be found in the Calder Road marshland were an integral part of this community fabric. They were not statistics. They were individuals living entirely ordinary, relatable lives until the moment they intersected with unimaginable darkness. The grim reality of the Calder Road area was first brought to the attention of law enforcement and the public through the tragic discovery of Heidi Fye. Heidi was a vibrant 23-year-old woman, navigating the complexities of young adulthood. She worked as a bartender, a profession that inherently required her to interact with a wide array of individuals, from regular locals seeking a quiet drink after a long day to transient travelers just passing through the area. She was known for her friendly demeanor and her ability to connect with people. In the late months of 1983, Heidi simply vanished. Her sudden disappearance sent immediate shockwaves through her family and her circle of friends. One moment she was a tangible presence in their lives, and the next she was gone, leaving behind an agonizing vacuum of unanswered questions. The waiting period that followed was a psychological torture for her loved ones. Every phone call, every knock at the door brought a surge of desperate hope that was inevitably crushed by continued silence. Months dragged on, turning the initial panic into a heavy, suffocating dread. Then, in April of 1984, the unbearable waiting came to a devastating end. Her remains were discovered in the overgrown, swampy expanse off Calder Road. The location of her discovery was chillingly remote, a place where a body could easily remain hidden from the world. For the investigators standing in that desolate field, the realization was grim. Heidi Fye was not just a tragic anomaly. She would become the grim harbinger of a deeply terrifying pattern that would plague the region for years to come. The horror escalated exponentially with the disappearance of Laura Miller. Laura was merely 16 years old, a teenager on the precipice of adulthood, filled with the typical anxieties, dreams, and innocent rebellions of youth. In 1984, the world was vastly different from today. There were no cell phones to instantly track a person's location, no pervasive network of surveillance cameras to retrace their steps. When you left your house, you were largely disconnected from your family until you returned. On the day she vanished, Laura partook in an activity so mundane, so remarkably ordinary, that it underscores the absolute terror of her fate. She walked to a local convenience store to use a public payphone. It was a short trip, a brief errand in her own neighborhood. She picked up the receiver, made her call, and then she was swallowed by the earth. She never made it back home. The anguish experienced by her family, particularly her father, Tim Miller, is beyond the capacity of language to fully convey. It is a primal, soul-crushing agony that only a parent who has lost a child can truly comprehend. In the immediate aftermath, the family faced a secondary institutional trauma. As was tragically common during that era, local law enforcement initially viewed Laura as a runaway. They looked at a 16-year-old girl who had vanished without a trace and applied a convenient, dismissive label. This classification drastically hampered the initial search efforts, losing precious, irreplaceable time. Her father refused to accept this narrative. He knew his daughter. He knew she would not simply abandon her life, her family, and her friends. He tirelessly searched, plastered flyers, and knocked on doors, completely consumed by the desperate need to find his child. His worst fears were violently confirmed in February of 1986. The discovery was not made by diligent police work or an organized search party, but by sheer, horrifying accident. A group of local children, riding their dirt bikes through the wild, overgrown trails of the Calder Road fields, stumbled upon the unimaginable. Hidden amongst the tall grass and the muddy water were the skeletal remains of Laura Miller. The environment had ruthlessly degraded the evidence, leaving behind only the stark, undeniable proof of a brutal murder. But the horror of that day in February did not end with the identification of Laura. While processing the scene where the teenager was found, investigators made an even more macabre and terrifying discovery. Lying in the very same desolate patch of marshland, chillingly close to Laura's remains, was another body. This proximity was not a coincidence. It was a screaming alarm bell. It solidified the terrifying realization that this specific area was being utilized as a systematic dumping ground. The second body found that day belonged to a woman whose identity had been completely erased by the elements and the cruelty of her killer. For over 3 decades, she would be known to the world only by a cold, clinical placeholder name, Calder Road Jane Doe. The woman who was forced to carry the title of Jane Doe for 33 agonizing years was, in reality, a 30-year-old woman named Audrey Lee Cook. Audrey was a fiercely independent individual, navigating a world that often demanded conformity. She worked as a mechanic, a physically demanding and predominantly male-oriented profession that spoke volumes about her resilience, her strength, and her determination to carve out her own path in life. She was a woman who was not afraid to get her hands dirty, who understood the mechanics of machines, and who worked hard to sustain herself. In December of 1985, she vanished. The circumstances surrounding her disappearance highlight the extreme vulnerability of individuals living transient or unconventional lifestyles during that time. She disappeared without generating the massive headlines or the immediate, frantic search efforts that typically accompany the loss of a prominent community member. She was a working-class woman whose sudden absence was initially noted by few, allowing her killer to slip away unnoticed. For 33 years, her family was left in a void of uncertainty. They did not know if she had simply decided to start a new life somewhere far away, or if she had fallen victim to foul play. They lived with a ghost. Meanwhile, Audrey lay nameless in a morgue, reduced to a collection of bones and a forensic puzzle that defied solution. The theft of her identity was a profound, secondary violation, stripping her of her humanity and reducing her life to an unsolved mystery. The darkness of the Calder Road fields continued to claim victims, demonstrating a relentless and terrifying persistence. In August of 1991, years after the discoveries of Heidi, Laura, and Audrey, the marshland surrendered yet another grim secret. Investigators, drawn back to the same accursed area, uncovered the skeletal remains of another woman hidden deep within the treacherous environment. Just like Audrey Lee Cook before her, this woman had been stripped entirely of her identity. The elements had done their devastating work, and the forensic technology of the early 1990s was woefully insufficient to give her back her name. She became known as Calder Road Janet Doe. For 28 long, silent years, she existed only as a case file, a set of measurements, and a forensic sketch that stared blankly from missing persons posters. It would take decades of agonizing waiting before the truth was finally revealed. Janet Doe was Donna Prudhomme, a 27-year-old woman who had disappeared sometime around 1988 or 1989. Donna was a mother, a daughter, a woman with a history, with struggles, and with a life that was brutally cut short. Her life, like the others, was deemed disposable by the predator who discarded her in the mud. The staggering amount of time she spent as an unidentified victim speaks to the profound isolation she must have experienced in her final moments and the overwhelming difficulty investigators faced when trying to reassemble the shattered pieces of these forgotten lives. These 4 women, Heidi Fye, Laura Miller, Audrey Lee Cook, and Donna Prudhomme, represent the tragic epicenter of the Calder Road mysteries. They came from different backgrounds, they were different ages, and they lived different lives. Yet, they were all violently forced into the same horrifying fraternity of victims. Their individual narratives, their hopes, their struggles, and their undeniable humanity were all eclipsed by the monstrous acts of the individuals who chose to end their lives. By understanding who they were, we actively resist the urge to view them merely as forensic evidence or as macabre roadside markers in a sprawling crime scene. We must acknowledge the profound weight of their absence and the devastating ripple effects their murders had on their families and the broader community. The pain of losing a loved one to violence is an unimaginable burden, but the families of these women were forced to carry an additional, suffocating weight, the agony of not knowing. For years, and in some cases for decades, they were denied the basic dignity of knowing what happened to their daughters, sisters, and mothers. They were trapped in a state of suspended animation, unable to fully grieve, unable to find closure, and constantly haunted by the terrifying unknown. The landscape of League City, with its bustling highway and its creeping, silent marshlands, became a constant, physical reminder of their profound loss. Every time they drove past the Calder Road exit, they were forced to confront the abyss where their loved ones were taken. The story of the Texas killing fields is not just a story about the killers who stalked the night. It is fundamentally a story about the devastating, enduring trauma inflicted upon those who were left behind to navigate the darkness. The discovery of the bodies along Calder Road did not merely mark the beginning of criminal investigations. It tore open a Pandora box of terror that permanently altered the psychological landscape of League City and the surrounding Texas communities. The incidents were not isolated tragedies that could be neatly categorized and filed away by local police departments. Instead, they served as the horrifying foundation of an ongoing nightmare that exposed the staggering vulnerabilities of a region caught between rapid modernization and untamed wilderness. When investigators arrived at the various scenes over the span of more than a decade, they were forced to confront a reality that defied standard law enforcement logic. The sheer horror of the discoveries was compounded by the chaotic, piecemeal fashion in which the victims were unearthed. Each new body brought an immediate surge of media attention, public panic, and crushing pressure on police departments that were ill-equipped to handle the scale and complexity of serial violence occurring in their jurisdiction. The local authorities, operating with limited resources and outdated investigative techniques during the 1980s and 90s, quickly realized they were hunting ghosts who knew the local terrain far better than anyone wearing a badge. The operational reality of investigating these crimes was an absolute labyrinth of confusion and professional frustration. In the early days, when Heidi Fye was discovered in April of 1984, the initial response was treated through the lens of a localized homicide. Detectives gathered what physical evidence they could, questioned local acquaintances, and attempted to reconstruct her final movements. But the marshland offered virtually no reliable forensic anchors. The combination of standing swamp water, dense vegetation, and intense humidity acted as a natural solvent for evidence, rapidly destroying biological traces, fingerprints, and shoe impressions that might have pointed directly to a perpetrator. When Laura Miller and the first unidentified woman, later known as Audrey Lee Cook, were found in February of 1986 by children riding dirt bikes, the investigation expanded in scope, yet remained agonizingly stagnant. The proximity of the two bodies suggested a chilling methodology, a deliberate choice of location that implied the killer was comfortable returning to the same general vicinity to discard evidence. Yet, despite this horrifying clue, detectives lacked the technological tools necessary to bridge the gap between finding a body in the mud and identifying the monster who placed it there. The investigative paralysis was further exacerbated by the jurisdictional hurdles that plagued the region. The Interstate 45 corridor cuts through multiple law enforcement boundaries, moving seamlessly from the jurisdiction of the Houston Police Department into Harris County Sheriff Office, passing through League City Police, and eventually reaching Galveston County. In an era before centralized criminal databases and seamless information sharing between agencies, these jurisdictional lines acted as invisible walls. If a woman went missing in Houston, her report was logged by city police. If her body was subsequently discovered in a remote marshland within League City or county jurisdiction, the case file might take days, weeks, or even months to effectively connect with the original missing persons report. Criminals quickly learned how to exploit these systemic fractures. They could abduct a victim in one vibrant, crowded municipality, transport them across invisible county lines in a matter of minutes via the high-speed interstate, and abandon them in an unpopulated wetland governed by a completely different agency with a fraction of the manpower. This bureaucratic fragmentation created massive blind spots that allowed serial predators to operate with virtual impunity for years. As the years rolled on, the nightmare deepened with the discovery of Janet Doe in August of 1991. By this time, the media had officially branded the stretch of land as part of the terrifying phenomenon known as the Texas killing fields. The psychological impact on the local population was profound and pervasive. Parents warned their teenage daughters to stay away from convenience store payphones. Hitchhiking became an unimaginable risk, and the simple act of driving down Interstate 45 after dark carried a palpable sense of dread. The community lived under a dark cloud of suspicion. Every stranger driving through town, every quiet neighbor with a secluded garage, and every transient worker passing through the oil fields and coastal ports became a potential suspect in the collective imagination of the residents. Yet, amidst this rising tide of fear, the actual police investigations faced a brick wall of silence and insufficient evidence. Detectives interviewed dozens of persons of interest, chased down countless tips, and pored over reams of case notes, but the physical evidence was simply too degraded to yield definitive indictments for the murders along Calder Road. The true complexity of the incident did not become fully apparent until behavioral analysts from the Federal Bureau of Investigation stepped into the fray to examine the totality of the case files. When the BAU looked closely at the victims recovered from the 25-acre marshland, they realized that the popular media narrative of a single, highly active serial killer was fundamentally flawed. The operational profiles of the victims, the estimated time frames of their disappearances, and the subtle variations in how the bodies were treated post-mortem pointed away from a lone mastermind and toward a much more frightening reality. The FBI analysts concluded that the location off Calder Road was being utilized by multiple, distinct predators who shared nothing more than a mutual awareness of the terrain's tactical advantages. This meant that while investigators were desperately searching for one specific monster, they were actually hunting a pack of independent predators who operated on completely different timelines, used different methods of elsewhere, and possessed entirely separate psychological motivations. The realization that several violent criminals had independently selected the exact same patch of wilderness as their private graveyard shattered any remaining hope for a quick, straightforward resolution to the cases. The investigation thus evolved into a grueling, multi-layered puzzle where detectives had to effectively unspool several distinct criminal threads simultaneously. They began examining known felons, sex offenders, and transient laborers who happened to be working or living along the Interstate 45 corridor during the respective windows when Heidi, Laura, Audrey, and Donna vanished. Names like Edward Harold Bell, a violent criminal whose later confessions and prison boasts drew intense scrutiny from investigators, were exhaustively analyzed. Bell had spent decades hovering around the periphery of law enforcement suspicion, linked to various crimes in the region. Yet connecting him definitively to the specific bodies on Calder Road proved to be an agonizingly complex legal challenge. Similarly, other violent offenders such as William Lewis Reese emerged as terrifying possibilities during subsequent reviews of the cold cases. Reese was linked to multiple brutal assaults and murders of young women in the broader Texas region during the 70s and 90s, prompting investigators to test his possible intersections with the killing field's victims. Yet, with each suspect examined, the devastating reality of the degraded physical evidence reared its ugly head. Without intact DNA or bulletproof corroborating witness testimony from decades prior, prosecutors could not cross the high threshold required to secure murder convictions in a court of law, leaving families suspended in a frustrating limbo where suspicion was high, but legal accountability remained infuriatingly out of reach. The passage of time did not heal the wounds inflicted by these tragedies. It merely compounded them with the heavy dust of neglect and the creeping despair that the truth would never come to light. As the 1990s faded into the 2000s, the active investigative momentum surrounding the Calder Road victims began to slow down, threatened by the crushing weight of thousands of newer, fresher homicide cases demanding attention from overburdened police departments. The files gathered dust in municipal archives, preserved only by the stubborn determination of a few dedicated cold case detectives who refused to let the names of Heidi, Laura, Audrey, and Donna fade entirely from memory. The marshland itself underwent environmental changes over the decades, as encroaching suburban development slowly pushed closer to the edges of the 25-acre patch, yet the dark aura of the location remained entirely intact. It stood as a silent, brooding monument to institutional failure, technological limitation, and the terrifying capacity of human beings to inflict unspeakable cruelty upon the vulnerable. The families of the victims watched as years turned into decades, carrying a grief that was continuously aggravated by the lack of definitive answers. They were forced to navigate a world that had stolen their loved ones and seemingly moved on, leaving them alone in their quest for justice. The investigation into the incidents along Calder Road stood as a stark reminder of the darkest limitations of the criminal justice system, proving that while geography can permanently mark a crime scene, the passage of time can render the path to truth an uphill battle against the very elements that first swallowed the victims. While the decades following the initial discoveries along Calder Road were characterized by profound frustration and institutional gridlock, the relentless march of technological innovation eventually breathed new life into investigations that had long been considered completely hopeless. For many years, the primary obstacle facing cold case detectives was the devastating degradation of physical evidence. The harsh Texas climate, the corrosive swamp water, and the passage of time had wreaked absolute havoc on the biological traces left behind by the perpetrators. Traditional DNA testing methods, which required relatively large and well-preserved samples to generate a viable profile, consistently hit brick walls when applied to the decades-old bone fragments and degraded items recovered from the marshland. Families of the victims were repeatedly forced to confront the harsh reality that forensic science had reached the absolute limit of its capabilities, leaving their loved ones trapped in permanent anonymity and robbing them of their rightful identities. Yet beneath the surface of this overwhelming scientific despair, a quiet revolution was taking place within the fields of genetic science and investigative methodology, a breakthrough that would fundamentally alter the trajectory of the Texas killing fields cold cases and finally offer a glimmer of long-awaited truth. The turning point in the modern phase of the investigation did not come from a traditional police confession, a lucky break from an informant, or a sudden eyewitness account. Instead, it arrived through the pioneering application of genetic genealogy, a sophisticated technique that combines advanced forensic DNA phenotyping with comprehensive family tree reconstruction. Organizations specializing in this cutting-edge science, most notably Parabon Nanolabs, began partnering with law enforcement agencies to re-examine DNA profiles extracted from long-forgotten homicide victims. The core principle behind this technology relies on the fact that human DNA contains vast amounts of genealogical data that can be cross-referenced with public genetic databases, allowing researchers to trace distant blood relatives and meticulously map out complex family trees until they isolate the exact branch where a missing person must belong. For the investigators handling the Calder Road files, this represented an entirely new frontier of hope. The two unidentified women who had haunted the case files for decades, the victims formerly logged as Calder Road Jane Doe and Calder Road Janet Doe, became prime candidates for this revolutionary scientific process, carrying the heavy burden of decades of silence as scientists went to work on their microscopic genetic fragments. The painstaking work required to extract usable DNA from decades-old, environmentally compromised bone material was nothing short of a scientific miracle. Geneticists had to utilize highly specialized extraction protocols to isolate minuscule amounts of human DNA while filtering out the overwhelming contamination from soil bacteria, fungi, and animal DNA that had invaded the remains over the years spent submerged in the marshland. Once a clean, viable genetic profile was successfully generated, it was uploaded into specialized genealogical databases, setting off a complex digital search across generations of family histories. Genetic genealogists and dedicated detectives spent countless hours poring over census records, birth certificates, marriage licenses, and historical archives, building massive, intricate family trees from scratch. They looked for missing branches, unexplained gaps in family histories, and female relatives who had vanished from public records around the relevant time frames of the mid-1980s and early 1990s. It was an intensely tedious, microscopic process that required an extraordinary level of patience and intuition, balancing cold, hard biological data with the deeply human nuances of historical family dynamics across the American landscape. The culmination of this relentless scientific detective work arrived in two breathtaking breakthroughs that shattered decades of agonizing anonymity. In 2019, the veil of mystery that had obscured the identity of Calder Road Jane Doe for 33 excruciating years was finally lifted. The genetic genealogy analysis successfully bridged the gap between the unidentified bone fragments and a living family, revealing that the woman found lying alongside Laura Miller back in February of 1986 was Audrey Lee Cook. Audrey, The resilient 30-year-old mechanic who had vanished from the world in December of 1985 finally had her name restored. The emotional impact of this revelation on her surviving family members was profound. For over 3 decades, they had lived in a paralyzing vacuum of uncertainty, wondering if Audrey had simply chosen to walk away from her life or if she had fallen victim to an unthinkable fate. The scientific confirmation of her death brought an end to the agonizing guessing game, providing a definitive, albeit tragic, conclusion to her long absence and reasserting her fundamental humanity in the face of a crime that had tried to erase her entirely from history. Shortly after the identification of Audrey Lee Cook, the second major breakthrough of the 2019 genealogical initiative pierced the darkness surrounding Calder Road Janet Doe. Through the exact same rigorous application of DNA family tree mapping, investigators definitively unmasked the identity of the woman whose skeletal remains had been recovered from the swamp in August of 1991. Janet Doe was scientifically confirmed to be Donna Prudhomme, a 27-year-old woman who had disappeared into the ether sometime between 1988 and 1989. Donna, a mother and a daughter whose life had been abruptly and violently cut short, had spent 28 long, silent years reduced to a mere case file number and a faded forensic sketch. Giving Donna her name back was a monumental triumph for the cold case investigators who had refused to let her memory fade into the murky waters of the marshland. It provided her grieving family with the solemn dignity of knowing the truth, transforming a nameless pile of bones back into a beloved human being with a distinct past, a personal history, and a tragic destiny that demanded accountability from the world that had failed to protect her. While the successful identification of Audrey Lee Cook and Donna Prudhomme represented a monumental leap forward in restoring dignity to the victims, it simultaneously intensified the pressure on law enforcement to solve the overarching mystery of who placed them in the marsh. Knowing who the victims were did not automatically reveal who committed the atrocities, particularly given the multi-killer hypothesis established by the FBI behavioral analysis. Detectives were forced to reevaluate every piece of circumstantial evidence, cross-referencing the newly established timelines of Audrey and Donna's disappearances against the known movements of the primary suspects who had hovered over the investigation for years. Names like Edward Harold Bell and William Lewis Reese were scrutinized with renewed vigor, as investigators desperately attempted to forge an unshakable evidentiary chain that could link their known patterns of predatory behavior directly to the Calder Road grave sites. Yet, the brutal reality of the passage of time continued to cast a long, inhibiting shadow over the judicial process. Witnesses had passed away, memories had faded into unreliable fog, and the physical crime scenes had long since been altered by the relentless march of suburban expansion and environmental degradation. The pursuit of justice thus transformed into an agonizing race against time for both the investigators and the aging family members of the victims, who had dedicated large portions of their lives to seeking closure. Every new investigative lead, every retested piece of degraded fabric, and every interview conducted with incarcerated felons became part of a desperate, last-ditch effort to puncture the wall of silence that had protected the killers for decades. The technological triumphs of genetic genealogy had proven that science could successfully restore names to the nameless, but the ultimate legal reckoning, the formal indictment, prosecution, and conviction of the men responsible for the unspeakable horrors of the Texas killing fields, remained an elusive, uphill battle. The investigative apparatus found itself suspended in a complex tension between modern scientific miracles and the ancient, rotting remnants of a criminal justice system that had been fundamentally outmatched by the sheer scale of the tragedy during the decades when the crimes were actually committed. The journey toward full accountability was far from over, leaving the dark legacy of Calder Road hanging heavily over the Texas landscape as a permanent reminder of the immense difficulty of seeking true justice when the evidence has been swallowed by the mud and time has allowed the perpetrators to hide in the shadows of history. The pursuit of legal accountability within the complex framework of the Texas killing fields has never been a straightforward journey through pristine courtrooms, but rather a grueling, multi-decade battle against the constraints of an imperfect judicial system. When looking at the legal landscape surrounding the Calder Road murders and the broader Interstate 45 corridor, one must confront a harsh and sobering reality. Despite decades of intense police work, exhaustive suspect profiling, and grand jury deliberations, the path to formal indictments and criminal convictions has been plagued by insurmountable evidentiary hurdles. The core tragedy of the legal efforts lies in the devastating tension between moral certainty and legal proof. Investigators, criminal profilers, and grieving family members often possessed a deeply intuitive and sometimes behaviorally sound understanding of who the predators were. Yet, moving from a compelling theory of criminal behavior to an unshakable, legally binding conviction in a court of law requires a standard of evidence that the damp, corrosive marshlands of League City systematically destroyed. The passage of time acted as a silent defense attorney for the guilty, eroding witness memories, silencing key informants permanently through death, and reducing physical traces to microscopic remnants that frequently defied traditional prosecution standards. Throughout the decades of investigation, a succession of notorious violent offenders emerged as primary targets for prosecutors attempting to build criminal cases for the Calder Road discoveries and related regional homicides. Among these figures, Edward Harold Bell stood out as a chilling embodiment of the predatory threat that had haunted the region. Bell was a convicted sex offender and violent criminal whose name became inextricably linked to the dark underbelly of South Texas crime. Over the years, particularly in the later stages of his life while he was already incarcerated for other offenses, Bell engaged in communications with law enforcement and investigators, dropping cryptic hints and occasional partial confessions regarding the young women and girls who had vanished along the highway. For families desperate for closure and detectives exhausted by dead ends, these communications offered a tantalizing, albeit agonizing, glimpse into the dark psychology of a man who appeared to revel in the power of his unspoken secrets. Yet, building a legally sound murder case against Edward Bell for the specific bodies discovered on Calder Road proved to be an exercise in immense frustration. Prosecutors found themselves blocked by a lack of corroborating physical evidence that could definitively place Bell at the specific 25-acre patch of marshland during the critical windows when Heidi Fye, Laura Miller, Audrey Lee Cook, or Donna Perdome disappeared. Confessions whispered or written from a prison cell, lacking independent verification, often fell short of the stringent requirements needed to secure a capital murder conviction before a court of law. Another prominent figure who cast a long and terrifying shadow over the Texas killing fields investigations was William Lewis Reese. Reese became a focal point for law enforcement agencies during subsequent cold case reviews as detectives attempted to map out the violent career of a predator whose methodology bore chilling similarities to the crimes along the Interstate 45 corridor. Reese was linked through forensic evidence and subsequent confessions to the abductions and murders of several young women in the broader Texas region during the same turbulent decades when the killing fields were actively claiming victims. The investigations into Reese demonstrated the systemic difficulty prosecutors faced when dealing with serial offenders who operated across multiple municipal jurisdictions. Piecing together his movements required an extraordinary level of interagency cooperation, as detectives from different counties and cities had to manually synchronize their case files, match timelines, and cross-reference ballistic or fiber evidence that had sat in separate archives for 30 years. While Reese eventually faced legal reckoning and convictions for other heinous crimes in neighboring jurisdictions, tying his specific actions directly to the individual bodies recovered from the Calder Road grave sites remained a formidable legal challenge. The absence of intact, untainted DNA profiles from the original 1980s and 90s crime scenes meant that prosecutors could not mathematically or forensically anchor Reese to the specific marshland plot where the victims were dumped, illustrating the tragic gap that so often exists between identifying a dangerous predator and proving their guilt beyond a reasonable doubt in front of a judge and jury. The courtroom dynamics that would have accompanied any potential trial related to the Calder Road murders present a fascinating and deeply sobering study in the limitations of criminal jurisprudence. Had prosecutors managed to cross the high threshold of indictment against suspects like Bell, Reese, or other lesser-known felons who hovered on the fringes of the investigation, they would have faced a battlefield of legal attrition. Defense attorneys would have systematically dismantled the prosecution narrative by attacking the structural integrity of the physical evidence. They would have reminded the jury of the decades that had passed since the bodies were pulled from the muck, highlighting the environmental degradation, the lack of continuous chain of custody documentation for certain degraded artifacts, and the inherent unreliability of aging eyewitness testimonies. In a court of law, a compelling psychological profile developed by the FBI Behavioral Analysis Unit, while invaluable for directing police strategy, holds no legal weight as direct proof of a crime. Juries require tangible, verifiable evidence, blood spatter matches, uncompromised DNA profiles, ballistic matches, or undeniable eyewitness accounts, elements that the toxic combination of swamp water, intense humidity, and time had systematically stripped away from the Calder Road crime scenes. This evidentiary vacuum created an invisible shield protecting the guilty, leaving the legal system structurally incapable of translating the immense societal tragedy of the killing fields into formal, courtroom-verified justice. The absence of traditional criminal trials and courtroom verdicts did not mean, however, that the legal and moral dimensions of the tragedy remained entirely stagnant. The relentless advocacy of family members, most notably Tim Miller following the devastating loss of his daughter Laura, fundamentally transformed how the justice system and local communities approach missing persons cases and unsolved homicides. Frustrated by the bureaucratic inertia, jurisdictional friction, and perceived indifference of traditional law enforcement agencies during the initial decades of the crisis, Tim Miller took the unprecedented step of founding Texas EquuSearch. This organization evolved into a massive, highly efficient network of civilian volunteers equipped with specialized search gear, watercraft, and tracking dogs, dedicated entirely to scouring the dangerous terrain of Texas to locate missing individuals and bring them home to their families. Through the tireless efforts of EquuSearch and similar grassroots advocacy groups, the legal and social consciousness surrounding vulnerable missing persons underwent a profound evolution. Law enforcement agencies were forced to abandon the dismissive, archaic practice of instantly labeling young women and transient individuals as voluntary runaways, shifting instead toward immediate, aggressive investigative protocols designed to catch predators before they could utilize desolate landscapes like the Calder Road marshland as permanent grave sites. Furthermore, the legal landscape surrounding cold cases in Texas and across the United States was forever altered by the integration of advanced forensic science and genealogical databases into statutory frameworks. As genetic genealogy proved its revolutionary capability by finally unmasking Audrey Lee Cook and Donna Prudhomme after decades of agonizing anonymity, legal and legislative bodies began adapting to this new reality. Questions surrounding genetic privacy, the use of public familial databases for criminal investigations, and the legal protocols required to subpoena or utilize third-party genetic trees became central topics in modern legal discourse. While these scientific and procedural advancements arrived too late to facilitate formal murder convictions for the early Calder Road victims, they established a powerful new legal precedent. They signaled to future predators that time and anonymity are no longer absolute allies, and that a nameless body buried in a remote marshland can eventually have its story reclaimed by the unyielding march of scientific truth. The legal narrative of the Texas killing fields thus stands as a complex, haunting mosaic, a stark monument to the systemic failures and evidentiary limitations of the past, contrasted sharply against the modern, relentless pursuit of accountability that continues to push the boundaries of what the justice system can achieve when faced with the darkest depths of human cruelty. As we stand at the final crossroads of this harrowing journey through the dark history of the Texas killing fields, the emotional resonance of the tragedy demands that we look beyond the police files, the forensic laboratories, and the complex legal battles to confront the profound human cost. The 25-acre expanse of marshland off Calder Road in League City is no longer just a geographical location or a case study in true crime analysis. It has become a permanent, haunting monument to a generation of stolen potential. When we reflect upon the lives of Heidi Fye, Laura Miller, Audrey Lee Cook, and Donna Prudhomme, alongside the dozens of other unidentified or named victims whose paths crossed with the brutal predators of the Interstate 45 corridor, we are forced to grapple with a lingering sorrow that time alone cannot heal. The landscape itself, with its tall, razor-sharp grass swaying beneath an indifferent Texas sky and its thick, blinding fog rolling in from the distant Gulf of Mexico, serves as a silent, brooding witness to the absolute worst of human nature. It reminds us that evil does not always announce itself with theatrical grandeur. Often, it operates quietly in the neglected, desolate spaces right at the edge of our daily lives, taking advantage of the blind spots created by a rapidly modernizing society that was too busy moving forward to notice the vulnerable souls falling by the wayside. The broader societal impact of the Texas killing fields extends far beyond the local borders of League City, Galveston, and Houston, fundamentally transforming how America views highway safety, missing persons investigations, and the hidden mechanics of serial predation. During the 1970s, 80s, and 90s, the cultural consciousness was largely insulated from the terrifying reality that multiple independent predators could simultaneously utilize the exact same geographic corridor as a communal hunting ground. The myth of the lone, highly visible serial killer dominated public imagination, making it difficult for communities and law enforcement agencies to comprehend the decentralized, opportunistic horror unfolding in their own backyards. The realization brought forward by the FBI behavioral analysis units that several distinct monsters had independently discovered the tactical advantages of the Calder Road marshland shattered this simplistic worldview. It forced a painful reckoning within the criminal justice system, exposing the catastrophic dangers of bureaucratic fragmentation, jurisdictional silos, and the systemic failure to connect missing persons reports across county and municipal lines. The lessons forged in the blood and tears of the killing fields catalyzed a massive, long-overdue modernization of law enforcement communication networks, ensuring that modern police departments are infinitely better equipped to track and intercept transient predators before they can establish hidden domains of terror in remote wilderness areas. Yet, perhaps the most profound legacy of this dark chapter is written not in policy changes or technological upgrades, but in the enduring resilience of the families who refuse to let their loved ones be forgotten by history. The tireless, heartbreaking advocacy of individuals like Tim Miller, who turned his personal, agonizing grief over the loss of his daughter Laura into the creation of Texas EquiSearch, stands as a radiant beacon of human compassion triumphing over despair. For decades, families of the victims endured a secondary, institutional trauma, navigating a world that often seemed indifferent to their pain while law enforcement struggled against insurmountable evidentiary walls. By mobilizing civilian volunteers, utilizing advanced search methodologies, and keeping public pressure alive when the cold case files threatened to gather dust forever, these grieving families and advocates redefined the standard of support for missing persons. They ensured that society could never look away from the human beings behind the forensic case files, transforming anonymous placeholders like Jane Doe and Janet Doe back into beloved daughters, sisters, and mothers whose individual stories demanded absolute dignity and a relentless pursuit of truth, no matter how many years had passed since they were stolen from the world. The integration of cutting-edge scientific innovation, particularly the revolutionary breakthroughs in genetic genealogy that finally restored the true names of Audrey Lee Cook and Donna Prudhomme after decades of agonizing anonymity, offers a profound philosophical reflection on the enduring power of truth. For many years, the physical elements of the marshland, the corrosive swamp water, the blistering heat, and the passage of time, seem to have granted the ultimate victory to the perpetrators by entirely erasing the identities of their victims. The technological triumph of extracting viable DNA from degraded bone fragments and mapping complex family trees across generations proved that science could successfully push back against the darkness. It sent an unmistakable, chilling message to any criminal who believes that time and isolation can grant absolute immunity. A name may be stolen and a body may be hidden in the mud, but the biological blueprint of human identity remains an unyielding witness that can eventually break through even the deepest layers of historical silence. While these scientific miracles could not always bridge the gap required to secure formal murder convictions in a court of law due to the decay of traditional physical evidence, they fundamentally redefined what closure means for families who had spent half a lifetime staring into an empty void of uncertainty. As we bring this deep exploration of the Texas killing fields to a close, we must carry with us the somber responsibility of remembrance, ensuring that the dark history of Calder Road is never romanticized, sensationalized, or reduced to mere entertainment. Every victim whose life was violently extinguished in that desolate marshland was a living, breathing person with complex dreams, personal struggles, and a fundamental right to exist in the world without fear. The tragedy of the Interstate 45 corridor is a stark, permanent reminder of the fragility of human safety and the devastating consequences that occur when the vulnerable are left unprotected in the blind spots of society. The tall grass may continue to grow, the heavy fog may still roll across the Texas highways, and the suburban sprawl may gradually encroach upon the old boundaries of the killing fields, but the lessons of this haunting era remain etched into the conscience of the nation. It is a legacy defined by profound sorrow, institutional failure, and heartbreaking loss, yet balanced eternally by the unbreakable resilience of families who fought for justice, the evolution of science that refused to let the innocent remain nameless, and a solemn collective commitment to ensure that the stories of those who were lost in the darkness will never, ever be forgotten. As the haunting narrative of the Texas killing fields transcended the boundaries of local police files and entered the broader national consciousness, it left an indelible mark on American popular culture and true crime media history. The sheer magnitude of the tragedy, combined with the chilling reality that multiple independent predators had utilized the desolate marshland off Calder Road as a shared dumping ground, captured the morbid fascination, deep sorrow, and profound empathy of the public across the entire nation. Stories of the victims, women and girls whose lives were so violently and prematurely stolen, began to circulate far beyond the borders of League City, transforming a regional nightmare into a national symbol of the dangers lurking along America's vast highway networks. For years, journalists, true crime authors, and documentary filmmakers attempted to untangle the complex web of jurisdiction, environmental degradation, and police frustration that defined the investigation. They sought to ensure that the public never forgot the human faces behind the cold case files, turning the spotlight onto a stretch of land that many locals had long wished to forget. This intense cultural focus was not merely a form of morbid sensationalism. Rather, it became an essential platform for keeping the pressure alive on law enforcement agencies, forcing accountability, and ensuring that the names of Heidi Fye, Laura Miller, Audrey Lee Cook, and Donna Prudhomme remained permanently etched into the public memory as a stark reminder of a collective failure to protect the vulnerable citizens of society. The profound gravity of these events eventually captured the attention of the film industry, leading to direct cinematic interpretations that brought the dark history of the Interstate 45 corridor to a global audience. In 2011, the harrowing realities of the region inspired the major feature film titled Texas Killing Fields, a gritty and atmospheric crime thriller directed by Ami Kanan Mann. The film starred prominent actors such as Sam Worthington, Jeffrey Dean Morgan, and Chloe Grace Moretz, and it was rooted directly in the authentic experiences and grueling challenges faced by the local law enforcement officers operating in the area. The movie did not shy away from depicting the bleak, oppressive atmosphere of the South Texas marshlands, the heavy fog rolling off the coast, and the overwhelming weight of despair that burdened the detectives trying to solve murders in an environment designed by nature to hide evidence. By translating the grim reality of the Calder Road discoveries into a cinematic narrative, the film served to amplify public awareness regarding the unsolved mysteries of the region. It exposed millions of viewers to the horrifying concept of multiple serial killers operating independently within the exact same geographic corridor, shedding light on the immense logistical and psychological hurdles that local police forces had to navigate while hunting shadows in the swamp. While cinematic dramatizations provided a dramatic window into the horrors of the killing fields, the most comprehensive, deeply emotional, and critically resonant exploration of the tragedy arrived over a decade later through modern documentary filmmaking. In 2022, Netflix released the acclaimed docuseries titled Crime Scene: The Texas Killing Fields, a multi-part investigative project that dove deep into the historical archives, police records, and personal lives affected by the decades of relentless violence along Interstate 45. This documentary series took a fundamentally different approach than Hollywood fiction, choosing instead to center its narrative around the voices that mattered most: the grieving family members, the dedicated cold case detectives, and the tireless advocates who had spent their lives fighting for truth. Through deeply emotional interviews, archival news footage, and meticulous investigative breakdowns. The series exposed the harrowing institutional failures, the bureaucratic gridlock between different municipal jurisdictions, and the agonizing years of silence that the families were forced to endure. It provided a raw, unflinching look at the human cost of the investigations, detailing how the initial dismissal of victims as voluntary runaways severely hampered early search efforts and allowed predators to slip away into the anonymity of the highway. The release of the Netflix docuseries served as a powerful cultural catalyst, reigniting public interest and injecting renewed urgency into ongoing efforts to resolve the remaining cold cases associated with the Calder Road marshland. Viewers across the world were introduced to the tireless, heartbreaking journey of individuals like Tim Miller, whose relentless advocacy through Texas EquuSearch became a shining example of parental grief transformed into a nationwide force for good. The documentary showcased the agonizing reality of the families who spent decades suspended in perpetual purgatory, not knowing what happened to their daughters or sisters, and highlighted the profound relief that finally arrived when modern genetic genealogy restored the true identities of Audrey Lee Cook and Donna Prudhomme. By presenting the facts with profound empathy and historical accuracy, the series effectively bridged the gap between past tragedies and present-day investigative possibilities. It reminded the global audience that behind every nameless forensic placeholder and every faded missing persons poster was a human being whose life mattered deeply, and whose family deserved absolute closure and unshakable justice, regardless of how many decades had slipped away into the mud and the swamp water. The cultural footprint of the Texas killing fields thus stands as a complex, multifaceted mirror reflecting both the darkest impulses of human behavior and the most inspiring manifestations of human resilience. The books, articles, films, and documentary projects that have examined the Interstate 45 corridor serve a critical dual purpose in modern society. On one hand, they act as permanent archival testaments to a dark chapter in American true crime history, ensuring that the victims are never reduced to mere statistics or forgotten footnotes in police ledgers. On the other hand, they function as powerful cautionary narratives, illuminating the systemic vulnerabilities, jurisdictional fractures, and environmental challenges that law enforcement agencies must overcome when confronted with transient serial predators. The widespread public engagement generated by these media projects has fundamentally altered the landscape of missing persons investigations, ensuring that modern police departments approach vulnerable populations with a heightened level of urgency and utilize advanced technological tools like DNA phenotyping and genetic genealogy from the earliest stages of an inquiry rather than waiting decades for breakthroughs to occur naturally in dusty filing cabinets. As we reflect on the profound influence of these cultural depictions, we must continually remind ourselves that the true story of the Texas killing fields is not entertainment, nor is it a puzzle designed for casual amusement or late-night consumption. It is a sobering, deeply painful reality that permanently altered the lives of countless families and cast a long, dark shadow over the communities nestled between Houston and Galveston. The films and documentaries have successfully brought international attention to the region, but the true measure of progress lies in the ongoing, unyielding commitment to uncovering the remaining secrets buried beneath the overgrown grass of Calder Road. Investigators continue to review degraded evidence, test new genetic leads, and evaluate the shifting stories of suspects like Edward Harold Bell and William Lewis Reese, driven by the knowledge that true accountability requires more than media visibility. It demands rigorous, unshakable legal proof that can withstand the test of time and the harsh realities of a courtroom. The media narrative has given a voice to the voiceless, but the ultimate chapter of the killing fields remains unwritten until every responsible predator is fully exposed and every family is granted the complete peace they so desperately deserve. The enduring legacy of the Texas killing fields ultimately compels us to maintain a state of vigilant empathy and historical awareness. The 25-acre patch of marshland off League City remains a silent, brooding monument to a tragedy that should never have been allowed to unfold with such unchecked persistence. Yet, within the heavy sorrow of this history lies an extraordinary testament to the power of human perseverance. From the grassroots creation of Texas EquuSearch by a grieving father who refused to let his daughter be forgotten, to the revolutionary breakthroughs of genetic science that reclaimed the identities of Audrey Lee Cook and Donna Prudhomme, the narrative of Calder Road is ultimately defined by the refusal to let darkness have the final word. As the physical landscape continues to change, with suburban development creeping closer to the old dumping grounds and modern investigative techniques pushing past the limitations of the past, the memory of those who were lost remains a guiding light. It ensures that society remains acutely aware of the hidden dangers lurking in the shadows of our bustling highways, honoring the victims not through fear, but through an unwavering, collective commitment to truth, justice, and the preservation of human dignity. The story of the killing fields will forever remain etched into the conscience of the nation as a haunting reminder of what happens when the vulnerable are left unprotected. But it will equally endure as a powerful symbol of the unbreakable human resolve to seek light even in the deepest, most unforgiving abyss of sorrow. As we navigate the winding, complex aftermath of the investigation surrounding the Texas killing fields, we are left to confront the reality that true closure in cases of such magnitude is rarely a neat, cinematic resolution that wraps up every loose end with absolute perfection. The journey through the dark history of the Interstate 45 corridor has shown us that while science can return names to the forgotten and media attention can force institutional transparency, the path to absolute justice remains fraught with profound and systemic challenges. The 25-acre patch of marshland off Calder Road in League City still holds secrets that have stubbornly resisted the best efforts of modern detectives, reminding us that the passage of time is a formidable adversary in the pursuit of accountability. Even as advanced genetic genealogy and sophisticated forensic tools continue to rewrite the rules of cold case investigations, the sheer volume of unresolved files and the permanent degradation of physical evidence from the 1970s, 80s, and 90s mean that many questions will likely linger in the shadows indefinitely, mocking the relentless efforts of those who seek complete transparency. The ongoing efforts of law enforcement agencies and dedicated cold case units demonstrate a quiet, persistent determination that refuses to let the remaining mysteries fade into oblivion or become entirely lost to the dust of municipal archives. Detectives assigned to these haunting files continue to review decades-old evidence lockers, meticulously re-examining microscopic threads, degraded fragments of clothing, and weathered case notes with the hope that a fresh perspective, a technological leap, or a newly developed forensic technique might unlock a vital clue that was missed decades ago. Every piece of archived material is treated with a solemn respect, recognizing that behind each clinical file number lies a human life that was prematurely, violently, and heartlessly extinguished. The collaborative network between local sheriff offices, state law enforcement agencies, and specialized forensic laboratories has grown increasingly sophisticated, ensuring that any future technological breakthroughs can be applied immediately and effectively to the remaining unidentified victims or lingering suspect profiles. This relentless institutional commitment serves as a vital shield against despair, proving that law enforcement agencies have not given up on the promise of delivering answers to the families who have waited decades for the truth. Yet, the true engine driving the ongoing search for justice has always been the unyielding advocacy and resilience of the families and grassroots organizations that emerged from the ashes of these devastating tragedies. The legacy of groups like Texas Equity Search, founded by Tim Miller in the wake of his daughter Laura's heartbreaking murder, extends far beyond the immediate geographical borders of South Texas, resonating across the entire nation as a testament to the power of parental love. It represents a fundamental paradigm shift in how society responds to missing persons and unsolved homicides, transforming individual grief into a powerful, organized collective force that actively assists in recovering the missing and supporting grieving relatives through their darkest hours. This grassroots infrastructure has permanently altered the social landscape, ensuring that families navigating the nightmarish uncertainty of a missing loved one no longer have to stand alone against bureaucratic indifference or systemic inertia. The volunteers who scour the dangerous terrain, follow up on forgotten leads, and maintain relentless public pressure on authorities embody the highest ideals of human empathy and community solidarity in the face of unspeakable darkness. The emotional and psychological weight borne by these families is a reality that demands our deepest reverence and understanding, forcing us to recognize the profound toll that unsolved violence extracts from generations. To live for decades in a state of perpetual limbo, knowing that a daughter, a sister, or a mother was violently stolen, yet lacking the definitive legal proof to hold their killer fully accountable in a court of law, is a burden that no human being should ever have to carry. Yet, despite the crushing weight of this grief, the families have consistently chosen to channel their pain into a force for positive change, ensuring that the memories of Heidi Fye, Laura Miller, Audrey Lee Cook, and Donna Prudhomme, alongside all the other victims of the corridor, remain vibrant, honored, and protected. Their tireless campaigns for truth have reshaped legislation, improved investigative standards, and forced a national reckoning regarding the systemic vulnerabilities that allowed multiple predators to operate with impunity along the highways of South Texas during the late 20th century, ensuring that future generations are shielded from similar institutional failures. The scientific evolution that eventually unmasked Audrey Lee Cook and Donna Prudhomme after decades of agonizing anonymity has also established a powerful new benchmark for what is possible in cold case investigations worldwide, proving that technological innovation can conquer historical obstacles. The triumph of genetic genealogy over the destructive forces of swamp water, intense heat, and time proved that human identity cannot be permanently erased by cruelty and isolation, no matter how remote the dumping ground. It sent an unmistakable message across the criminal justice landscape. A name may be hidden, a body may be discarded in an overgrown marsh, and years may slip away into historical silence, but the biological blueprint of a human life remains an unyielding witness that can eventually break through the darkest barriers of time. This scientific milestone has provided hope to countless other families around the globe who are searching for missing relatives, demonstrating that no case is truly hopeless as long as dedicated scientists and investigators are willing to push the boundaries of what technology can achieve in the pursuit of fundamental human dignity. As we reflect on the totality of the Texas killing fields narrative, we must guard against the temptation to view these events as mere entertainment, sensationalized fiction, or a distant, closed chapter of history that has no bearing on our modern world. The desolate expanse off Calder Road is a permanent, brooding reminder of the fragility of human safety and the devastating consequences that occur when society fails to protect its most vulnerable members from the shadows of our bustling infrastructure. The Interstate 45 corridor remains a vital, busy artery of modern travel and commerce, carrying thousands of unsuspecting commuters and families every single day past the very locations where unspeakable horrors once unfolded. The tall grass still grows in the marshlands, the coastal fog still rolls in from the Gulf to obscure the horizon, and suburban development continues to push closer to the old boundaries of the dumping grounds, creating a striking visual contrast between the mundane routines of daily life and the dark history buried just beneath the surface of the soil. The responsibility of remembrance rests heavily upon all of us who bear witness to these stories, challenging us to maintain an active state of historical awareness and deep empathy. We are tasked with ensuring that the victims are never reduced to mere statistics, sensationalized headlines, or forgotten footnotes in true crime chronicles, but are remembered for the full breadth of their humanity. They were living, breathing individuals with rich interior lives, complex personal struggles, and boundless potential that was cruelly intercepted by the dark impulses of predatory men who exploited the vulnerabilities of their environment. By honoring their humanity, maintaining our collective awareness of the systemic failures that enabled their victimhood, and supporting the ongoing, tireless pursuit of truth, we ensure that their stories serve as both a solemn memorial and an enduring catalyst for a safer, more vigilant world. The legacy of the killing fields is ultimately defined by a profound, unyielding paradox: the terrifying capacity of human beings to inflict unimaginable cruelty, balanced eternally against the inspiring resilience of families, scientists, and advocates who refuse to let the darkness have the final word. The journey through the history of the Texas killing fields has taken us deep into the heart of a regional nightmare that expanded into a national symbol of true crime tragedy, testing the limits of forensic science, challenging the structural integrity of the criminal justice system, and exposing the harrowing reality of multiple predators operating in the blind spots of a modernizing nation. While many legal questions may remain forever unanswered, and the physical landscape continues to evolve under the relentless press of time, the core lessons of Calder Road remain unalterably etched into the conscience of society. We leave this harrowing exploration with a profound sense of sorrow for the lives that were lost, an abiding respect for those who fought tirelessly to reclaim their identities, and an unwavering commitment to keeping their memories alive in the light of truth and justice, ensuring that no soul lost in the shadows of the highway is ever truly forgotten by history. As we approach the final cadence of this deeply unsettling exploration into the dark history of the Texas killing fields, we find ourselves compelled to look past the physical boundaries of the Calder Road marshland and confront the enduring psychological weight that this tragic corridor carries into the modern era. The 25-acre patch of overgrown wilderness off League City is no longer just a geographical location marked by past atrocities. It has evolved into a permanent, sobering touchstone for the entire true crime community, representing the absolute limits of institutional preparedness, the devastating consequences of jurisdictional fragmentation, and the relentless, unyielding spirit of those who refuse to let the victims fade into historical obscurity. When we survey the landscape today, watching the heavy coastal fog roll in from the distant Gulf of Mexico and listening to the relentless hum of traffic speeding along Interstate 45, we are forcefully reminded that the surface of the earth can easily mask the deep, hidden scars of human cruelty. The physical environment remains an active, brooding participant in the ongoing legacy of the region, whispering tales of vulnerability and loss to anyone willing to pause and listen to the heavy silence that settles over the marshlands as day turns into night. The profound transformation that has occurred in the collective consciousness surrounding these cold cases is a testament to the power of persistent advocacy, technological evolution, and unwavering human empathy. For decades, the families of the women and girls whose lives were stolen in the shadows of the highway were forced to navigate a lonely, frustrating labyrinth of bureaucratic indifference and institutional silence, carrying an invisible burden that grew heavier with every passing year. They were confronted with closed doors, lost files, and a criminal justice system that was fundamentally unequipped to handle the complex, overlapping realities of multiple predators operating simultaneously in the same remote corridor. Yet, through the sheer force of their collective will, these families shattered the wall of silence. Individuals like Tim Miller, who turned his agonizing grief over the loss of his daughter Laura into the monumental creation of Texas EquiSearch, transformed individual tragedy into a nationwide movement of hope and proactive rescue. They redefined the standard of support for missing persons, ensuring that future generations would never have to face the cold, dismissive treatment that hindered the initial investigations during the turbulent decades of the 1970s, 80s, and 90s. The scientific milestones that ultimately pierced the decades of darkness surrounding Calder Road, most notably the revolutionary breakthroughs in genetic genealogy that finally restored the true identities of Audrey Lee Cook and Donna Prudhomme, marked a watershed moment in the history of forensic science. For 33 and 28 agonizing years, respectively, these women existed only as cold case numbers, anonymous placeholders in police ledgers, and ghostly sketches on faded missing persons flyers. The triumph of extracting viable DNA from severely compromised bone fragments and successfully mapping complex family trees across generations proved that science could conquer the destructive forces of swamp water, intense humidity, and time. It sent an unmistakable, chilling message to any predator who believes that isolation and secrecy can grant absolute immunity. A name may be hidden, a body may be discarded in a desolate marsh, and decades may slip away into historical silence. But the biological blueprint of human identity remains an unyielding witness that can eventually break through even the deepest barriers of time. This triumph of modern genetics provided a profound sense of psychological closure to grieving relatives, returning the fundamental dignity of their names and humanity to women who had been treated as disposable objects by their killers. Yet, even as we celebrate these monumental scientific victories and honor the tireless dedication of modern cold case detectives who refuse to let the files gather dust, we must maintain a clear-eyed realism regarding the stubborn limitations that still haunt the pursuit of absolute legal accountability. The harsh reality of the Texas killing fields is that the very elements which made the 25-acre marshland an ideal dumping ground for serial predators, the corrosive mud, the aggressive wildlife, the intense climate, and the passage of decades, also systematically destroyed the physical evidence required to secure capital murder convictions in a court of law. Confessions whispered from prison cells by aging criminals like Edward Harold Bell, while offering tantalizing glimpses into the dark psychology of the perpetrators, frequently fell short of the stringent evidentiary standards demanded by prosecutors and juries. The absence of pristine, uncompromised DNA chains or intact ballistic matches from the original crime scenes means that the legal system often finds itself structurally incapable of translating moral certainty into formal courtroom verdicts. This tragic gap between knowing who the monsters likely were and possessing the bulletproof evidence required to lock them away forever remains one of the most agonizing burdens carried by those who seek complete justice for the victims. The broader cultural and societal impact of the Texas killing fields serves as an indispensable cautionary tale for a modernizing world that is constantly expanding its infrastructure and transportation networks. The Interstate 45 corridor, functioning as a vital economic artery connecting the massive urban expanse of Houston to the coastal attractions of Galveston, represents the classic American dichotomy between connectivity and anonymity. A bustling highway is a double-edged sword. It facilitates the seamless movement of commerce, families, and culture, but it simultaneously offers predators an infinite supply of transient targets and immediate, high-speed escape routes into unpopulated wilderness areas. The harrowing lessons forged in the blood and tears of the killing fields forced law enforcement agencies across the nation to reevaluate their operational strategies, dismantling the archaic jurisdictional silos that once allowed violent criminals to exploit the invisible boundaries between municipal, county, and state police forces. Modern police departments are now infinitely better equipped to share intelligence, track suspicious patterns across regional lines, and deploy advanced forensic tools during the earliest stages of a missing person investigation, ensuring that vulnerable individuals do not slip through the administrative cracks the way Heidi Fye, Laura Miller, Audrey Lee Cook, Donna Prudhomme, and countless others did decades ago. As we bring this comprehensive, deeply immersive exploration of the Texas killing fields to its final conclusion, we must ensure that our enduring focus remains fixed squarely where it belongs, upon the humanity of the victims and the timeless value of the lives that were stolen. Every woman and young girl whose journey ended prematurely in the dark, muddy waters of the League City marshland was a living, breathing person with complex dreams, personal struggles, everyday joys, and an absolute, unalienable right to walk the earth without fear. They were daughters, sisters, mothers, and friends whose sudden, violent absences left permanent, bleeding vacancies in the hearts of their families and communities. To reduce them to mere sensationalized statistics, true crime entertainment tropes, or forgotten footnotes in the annals of criminal history would be a profound betrayal of their memory. We are tasked with the solemn, sacred responsibility of bearing witness to their stories, carrying the heavy truth of their experiences forward with deep empathy, unwavering respect, and a collective commitment to maintaining our vigilance against the dark impulses that thrive in the neglected corners of our society. The legacy of the Texas killing fields will forever remain an intricate, haunting mosaic of human sorrow and human resilience. It is a stark monument to institutional failure, environmental degradation, and the terrifying capacity of men to inflict unspeakable cruelty upon the vulnerable. Yet, it is balanced eternally against the inspiring, unbreakable resolve of families who fought tirelessly for truth, scientists who conquered the limitations of time to restore stolen names, and advocates who built a nationwide movement of proactive compassion out of the ashes of their own grief. The tall grass may continue to sway beneath the indifferent Texas sky. The coastal fog will still roll in from the Gulf to blanket the highways, and the relentless march of suburban development will continue to edge closer to the old boundaries of the dumping ground. But the core lessons of Calder Road are permanently etched into the conscience of the nation. We leave this harrowing narrative with a profound sense of sorrow for the lives that were tragically intercepted, an abiding respect for those who refused to let the darkness win, and an unshakable dedication to ensuring that the names and stories of the victims of the Texas killing fields will never, ever be forgotten by history. As we arrive at the final horizon of this extensive and harrowing journey through the dark history of the Texas killing fields, we are met with a profound sense of closure that is simultaneously heavy with sorrow and illuminated by an enduring spirit of resilience. The 25-acre patch of overgrown marshland off Calder Road in League City, Texas, stands today not merely as a relic of a terrifying era, but as a permanent monument to a chapter of American crime history that can never and should never be erased from our collective memory. When we look back across the decades, traversing the difficult terrain from the initial shocking discoveries of the early 1980s through the agonizing years of investigative gridlock, bureaucratic frustration, and technological stagnation, we are forced to reckon with the sheer fragility of human safety. The Interstate 45 corridor, with its constant hum of high-speed traffic, its endless stream of transient travelers, and its stark geographical proximity to desolate, fog-drenched wetlands, serves as a permanent reminder of how easily the vulnerable can fall through the cracks of a rapidly modernizing society that is often too focused on forward momentum to notice the shadows lurking right at the edge of the pavement. The landscape itself, with its tall grass swaying in the coastal breeze and its deep, muddy waters hiding secrets for decades, has become an inseparable part of the narrative, a silent and unyielding witness to human cruelty that defies simple explanation or easy absolution. The journey we have undertaken together through these files has demanded that we look far beyond the sensationalized headlines and the cold clinical statistics of true crime entertainment, compelling us instead to confront the raw, beating heart of the human tragedy at the center of the storm. We have examined the intricate complexities of a multi-killer hypothesis that shattered the comforting Hollywood myth of a single, isolated mastermind, revealing instead the far more terrifying reality of multiple independent predators who recognize the tactical advantages of a shared geographical trap. We have traced the agonizing labyrinth of jurisdictional silos, communication barriers, and investigative dead ends that allowed these violent men to operate with virtual impunity during a time when law enforcement agencies were woefully unequipped to coordinate across municipal and county lines. Yet, through every dark twist and turn of this protracted nightmare, our primary anchor has always remained fixed upon the individuals whose lives were so brutally and prematurely intercepted. Heidi Fye, Laura Miller, Audrey Lee Cook, and Donna Prudhomme, alongside the many other women and young girls whose names or circumstances remain etched into the grief of the region, were not mere case files or temporary markers in a gruesome geographical puzzle. They were vibrant, complex human beings with families who loved them, futures that were abruptly stolen, and an absolute, unalienable right to walk the earth in safety and dignity. The passage of time, which so often acts as a corrosive agent that buries truth beneath layers of neglect and fading memory, has in the case of the Texas killing fields also revealed the astonishing capacity of human perseverance and scientific innovation to push back against the darkness. The revolutionary breakthroughs in genetic genealogy that finally pierced 33 and 28 years of agonizing anonymity for Audrey Lee Cook and Donna Prudhomme stand as monumental triumphs of modern science over historical despair. By extracting viable DNA from severely degraded bone fragments and meticulously reconstructing complex family trees across generations, genetic genealogists and dedicated detectives prove that human identity cannot be permanently obliterated by cruelty, swamp water, or time. This scientific revolution sent an unmistakable message across the criminal justice landscape. A name may be hidden for decades, a body may be discarded in a remote marsh, and the physical crime scene may be altered beyond recognition. But the biological blueprint of a human life remains an unyielding witness that can eventually break through even the deepest barriers of silence. While these technological miracles could not always bridge the evidentiary gap required to secure formal capital murder convictions in a court of law due to the relentless destruction of traditional physical evidence, they fundamentally redefined what closure means for grieving families, restoring the fundamental dignity of their names and humanity to women who had been treated as disposable objects by their killers. Yet, Even as we celebrate these profound scientific milestones and honor the tireless dedication of modern cold case units that refuse to let the remaining files gather dust, we must maintain an honest, clear-eyed realism regarding the stubborn limitations that still haunt the pursuit of absolute legal accountability. The harsh reality of the Texas killing fields is that the very environmental conditions which made the Calder Road marshland an ideal dumping ground, the corrosive mud, the aggressive wildlife, the intense Texas climate, and the slow erosion of decades, also systematically destroyed the pristine physical evidence required to cross the exceptionally high threshold of proof demanded by a court of law. Confessions whispered from prison cells by aging criminals like Edward Harold Bell, while offering chilling insights into the dark psychology of predatory minds, frequently fell short of the stringent evidentiary standards needed to secure formal indictments or convictions before a jury. This tragic gap between moral certainty and legal proof remains one of the most agonizing burdens carried by those who seek complete justice for the victims. It serves as a sobering reminder of the structural imperfections of the criminal justice system, illustrating that knowing who the monsters likely were is fundamentally different from possessing the bulletproof, uncompromised evidence required to lock them away forever under the weight of a formal courtroom verdict. The broader societal and cultural impact of the Texas killing fields has forged an indispensable legacy that extends far beyond the local borders of League City, Galveston, and Houston, permanently reshaping how modern America approaches highway safety, missing persons investigations, and the hidden mechanics of transient predation. The harrowing lessons learned through the blood and institutional failures of the past force law enforcement agencies nationwide to dismantle archaic jurisdictional silos, upgrade communication networks, and prioritize immediate, aggressive investigative protocols when dealing with missing vulnerable populations. The archaic, dismissive practice of instantly labeling young women or individuals living unconventional lifestyles as voluntary runaways has been replaced by a rigorous, proactive framework designed to track suspicious patterns across regional lines and utilize advanced forensic tools from the very beginning of an inquiry. Furthermore, the cultural footprint of the region, amplified through investigative journalism, cinematic dramatizations, and acclaimed documentary series like the Netflix exploration of the killing fields, has ensured that the public consciousness remains acutely aware of the hidden dangers lurking in the shadows of our bustling transportation corridors. These media projects, when approached with deep empathy and historical accuracy rather than cheap sensationalism, serve a vital dual purpose as both permanent archival testaments to a dark chapter in true crime history and powerful cautionary narratives that demand eternal vigilance from society. At the very center of this monumental evolution stands the extraordinary resilience and tireless advocacy of the families and grassroots organizations that emerged from the ashes of unimaginable grief. The legacy of groups like Texas EquiSearch, founded by Tim Miller in the wake of the devastating loss of his daughter Laura, represents a radiant triumph of human compassion over despair. By transforming private heartbreak into a nationwide, highly efficient network of civilian volunteers dedicated to searching for the missing and supporting grieving relatives through their darkest hours, these families redefined the standard of care for missing persons. They ensured that future generations of families navigating the nightmarish uncertainty of a missing loved one would never again have to stand entirely alone against bureaucratic indifference or institutional inertia. The emotional and psychological weight borne by these families over decades of waiting is a reality that commands our deepest reverence, reminding us of the profound, lasting toll that unsolved violence extracts from generations. Their refusal to let the memories of the victims fade into obscurity has shaped legislation, improved policing standards, and driven a continuous, unyielding demand for truth that has kept the torch of accountability burning even when the institutional fires threaten to flicker out entirely. As we bring this immersive, comprehensive exploration to its final close, we must ensure that our enduring focus remains fixed squarely upon the humanity of the victims and the timeless value of the lives that were so cruelly intercepted. Every woman and young girl whose journey ended prematurely in the dark, muddy waters of the League City marshland was a living, breathing person with complex dreams, everyday joys, personal struggles, and an absolute right to exist in the world without fear. They were daughters, sisters, mothers, and friends whose sudden, violent absences left permanent, bleeding vacancies in the hearts of those who loved them. To reduce them to mere sensationalized statistics, true crime entertainment tropes, or forgotten footnotes in the annals of criminal history would be a profound and unforgivable betrayal of their memory. We are tasked with the solemn, sacred responsibility of bearing witness to their stories, carrying the heavy truth of their experiences forward with deep empathy, unwavering respect, and a collective commitment to maintaining our vigilance against the dark impulses that thrive in the neglected corners of our society. The legacy of the Texas killing fields will forever remain an intricate, haunting mosaic of human sorrow and human resilience, standing as a stark monument to institutional failure and environmental vulnerability, yet balanced eternally against the inspiring, unbreakable resolve of families who fought for truth, scientists who conquered the limitations of time to restore stolen names, and advocates who built a nationwide movement of proactive compassion out of the ashes of their own grief. The tall grass may continue to sway beneath the indifferent Texas sky. The coastal fog will still roll in from the Gulf to blanket the highways, and the relentless march of suburban development will continue to edge closer to the old boundaries of the dumping ground. But the core lessons of Calder Road are permanently etched into the conscience of the nation, ensuring that the names and stories of those who were lost in the shadows of the highway will never, ever be forgotten by history. As we step past the final boundaries of our detailed examination into the darkest corners of the Texas killing fields, we find ourselves standing in a space defined equally by profound sorrow and an unyielding quest for absolute truth. The 25-acre expanse off Calder Road in League City remains more than just a grim historical footnote or an infamous true crime landmark. It is a permanent mirror reflecting the depths of human darkness and the relentless resilience of those who refuse to let the victims be forgotten by the world. When we cast our gaze back across the sweeping chronology of this decades-long tragedy, from the initial, shattering discoveries of the 1980s through the intricate web of multi-killer theories, jurisdictional failures, forensic brick walls, and modern genealogical miracles, we are compelled to acknowledge that the echoes of these events still resonate deeply within the collective conscience of society. The physical landscape itself, with its flat, unforgiving terrain, its thick coastal fog rolling in from the distant horizon, and the constant, indifferent hum of traffic on Interstate 45, serves as an eternal sentinel guarding secrets that have resisted the full measure of human justice. It is a haunting reminder that history is never truly buried, no matter how deeply its tragedies are concealed beneath the mud and swamp water of a forgotten field. The true weight of the Texas killing fields cannot be measured solely by the cold metrics of investigative files, court documents, or forensic reports, but must instead be felt through the enduring human stories of the lives that were so violently interrupted. The women and girls whose journeys ended prematurely in that desolate marshland. Heidi Fye, Laura Miller, Audrey Lee Cook, Donna Prudhomme, and the others whose names and faces are forever tied to the grief of the region, were vibrant individuals with rich inner lives, personal aspirations, and deep connections to families who loved them fiercely. Their sudden, brutal absences created permanent, bleeding voids that time can never truly heal, casting a long and heavy shadow over generations of relatives who were forced to navigate a harrowing landscape of uncertainty and institutional frustration. By continually returning our focus to their humanity, we actively reject the desensitizing trap of true crime sensationalism, ensuring that they are remembered not as anonymous victims of a gruesome geographical anomaly, but as beloved daughters, sisters, mothers, and friends whose existence mattered profoundly, and whose right to safety and dignity was violently stolen by predators who exploited the systemic vulnerabilities of their environment. The evolution of the investigation itself stands as a testament to the remarkable, albeit agonizingly slow, progress of human ingenuity in the face of insurmountable odds. For decades, detectives and grieving families ran up against the immovable barriers of degraded physical evidence, destroyed by the corrosive swamp water, intense Texas heat, and the relentless passage of time. The legal system, bound by strict evidentiary standards and hampered by archaic jurisdictional silos, frequently found itself structurally incapable of transforming moral certainty into formal courtroom convictions, leaving a painful gap between knowing who the perpetrators likely were and possessing the pristine proof required to lock them away forever. Yet, against this backdrop of institutional limitation and historical despair, modern science carved a path toward truth through the revolutionary power of genetic genealogy. The triumphant identification of Audrey Lee Cook and Donna Prudhomme, after decades of agonizing anonymity, proved unequivocally that human identity cannot be permanently erased by cruelty or isolation. It established a powerful new precedent demonstrating that the biological blueprint of a person remains an unyielding witness, capable of piercing through the deepest layers of historical silence and restoring stolen names to those who were cast aside in the dark. Beyond the laboratories and the courtrooms, the legacy of the killing fields is permanently intertwined with the extraordinary resilience of grassroots advocacy and community solidarity. The transformation of private, overwhelming grief into organized, proactive action, exemplified most powerfully by Tim Miller and the establishment of Texas EquiSearch following the tragic loss of his daughter Laura, reshaped the landscape of missing persons investigations nationwide. By mobilizing civilian volunteers, utilizing specialized search methodologies, and maintaining unyielding public pressure on authorities, these families and advocates ensured that no missing person would ever again be easily dismissed or forgotten by a system overwhelmed by bureaucracy. They built an enduring infrastructure of hope and compassion out of the ashes of their own heartbreak, creating a safety net for vulnerable populations and proving that collective human empathy can successfully challenge even the most profound institutional indifference. Their tireless efforts have permanently elevated the standard of care, ensuring that modern law enforcement agencies approach disappearances with a heightened sense of urgency and utilize advanced investigative tools from the very outset of an inquiry. The cultural and societal resonance of the Texas killing fields serves as a permanent, cautionary beacon for a modernizing world that continues to expand its transportation networks and commercial corridors. The Interstate 45 corridor, acting as a vital economic artery connecting major urban centers to the coast, remains a stark physical manifestation of the classic American dichotomy between connectivity and anonymity. A bustling highway offers the promise of movement and opportunity, but it simultaneously provides transient predators with immediate access to vulnerable targets and rapid escape routes in unpopulated wilderness areas. The harrowing lessons forged in the blood and institutional failures of the past force police departments across the nation to dismantle invisible bureaucratic walls, improve interagency intelligence sharing, and recognize the complex realities of multi-predator environments. Society can no longer afford the comforting illusion of the lone, highly visible serial killer as the sole template of threat. We must remain acutely aware of the decentralized, opportunistic dangers that can thrive in the blind spots of our rapidly changing environment, maintaining an active state of vigilance to protect those who walk at the margins of our communities. The solemn duty of remembrance that we carry forward from this harrowing chapter requires a conscious, daily dedication to keeping the flame of truth alive through our collective awareness and deep empathy. It asks us to look past the superficial allure of true crime entertainment and engage with the profound moral weight of the lives that were affected, recognizing that every missing person represents an entire universe of human potential, emotional bonds, and unfulfilled dreams that deserve our utmost respect and protection. The journey through the history of Calder Road has tested the limits of our understanding, challenged the structural integrity of our legal institutions, and exposed the fragile boundaries of human safety in a modern society. Yet it has ultimately revealed the indomitable strength of the human spirit when confronted by the darkest abyss of cruelty. We leave this comprehensive narrative with a heavy heart for the sorrows of the past, an abiding reverence for those who refuse to surrender to despair, and an unwavering commitment to ensuring that the memory of the victims remains an eternal guiding light toward a safer, more just, and deeply compassionate world. As we bring this extensive, immersive exploration of the Texas killing fields to its definitive close, we are left with a powerful, lingering paradox that defines the human experience in the face of unimaginable tragedy. On one hand, we bear witness to the terrifying capacity of human beings to inflict unspeakable cruelty upon the vulnerable, exploiting the quiet, overgrown corners of the world to hide their dark deeds and evade accountability. On the other hand, we are continuously inspired by the unbreakable resolve of families who fought tirelessly for truth, scientists who conquered the limitations of time to restore stolen names, and advocates who built a nationwide movement of proactive compassion out of their own sorrow. The tall grass may continue to sway beneath the indifferent Texas sky. The coastal fog will still roll in from the Gulf to blanket the highways, and the relentless march of suburban development will continue to edge closer to the old boundaries of the dumping ground. But the core lessons of Calder Road are permanently etched into the conscience of the nation, ensuring that the names and stories of those who were lost in the shadows of the highway will never, ever be forgotten by history. Ultimately, the shadow cast by the Texas killing fields extends across the entire fabric of modern society as a solemn reminder that true justice is not merely a legal verdict delivered within a courtroom, but an ongoing moral obligation embraced by every living person who chooses to remember. The individuals who succumbed to the darkness along Interstate 45 did not vanish in a total oblivion. Instead, their spirits live on through every scientific breakthrough, every compassionate advocacy effort, and every conscious step society takes to safeguard the vulnerable. As the years stretch onward and the physical traces of the past continue to fade beneath the changing landscape of South Texas, the enduring echo of their stories stands as an eternal testament to human resilience. It challenges us never to look away from the painful truths of our history, inspiring a collective commitment to vigilance, empathy, and unwavering truth that ensures their bright light will never be completely extinguished by the endless night. As we arrive at the absolute final chapter of this long, harrowing, and deeply emotional exploration into the dark heart of the Texas killing fields, we find ourselves standing once again at the edge of the 25-acre marshland off Calder Road. The journey we have taken together through the winding history of the Interstate 45 corridor has tested the limits of our understanding, laid bare the catastrophic failures of institutional coordination, and exposed the chilling reality of multiple predators operating in the blind spots of a rapidly modernizing society. Yet, even as we close the final case files and step away from the fog-drenched wetlands of League City, we are left with a resonant, enduring truth that transcends the boundaries of true crime storytelling. This is a narrative that refuses to be neatly filed away or forgotten in the dusty archives of municipal history, because the echoes of what happened in those overgrown fields continue to reverberate through the lives of everyone touched by the tragedy. The landscape itself, unchanging in its stark, desolate beauty, remains an eternal monument to a dark era, whispering of the profound vulnerability that exists when the margins of our world are left unprotected. We are left to ponder the delicate balance between human connection and anonymous isolation, recognizing that the safety we often take for granted is fragile, sustained only by our collective vigilance, our willingness to look closely at the uncomfortable truths, and our absolute refusal to let the shadows swallow those who walk alone along the busy highways of our modern world. The core of this entire chronicle has never been about the clinical mechanics of forensic detection or the morbid fascination of criminal pathology. It has always been, and must always remain, about the human lives that were so violently and prematurely intercepted. When we reflect upon the names of Heidi Fye, Laura Miller, Audrey Lee Cook, and Donna Prudhomme, alongside the many other women and young girls whose stories are forever bound to this tragic stretch of highway, we are reminded of the immense, irreplaceable value of an individual human existence. They were daughters with boundless potential, sisters who shared irreplaceable bonds, mothers who nurtured futures, and friends whose laughter filled rooms before it was permanently silenced by unspeakable cruelty. Their sudden, devastating absences created voids that time can never truly fill, casting a lifelong shadow over families who were forced to navigate a harrowing landscape of institutional indifference and agonizing uncertainty. By anchoring our understanding firmly in their humanity, we reject the dehumanizing pull of sensationalism, ensuring that they are remembered not as anonymous statistics or forgotten footnotes in a gruesome puzzle, but as vibrant, complex people whose right to exist in safety and dignity was absolute. Their memories demand our utmost respect, serving as a constant, aching reminder of the profound cost of the violence that was allowed to flourish in the neglected spaces of our society during those turbulent decades, leaving behind a legacy of sorrow that time alone can never fully heal or wash away. The evolution of the investigation surrounding the killing fields also offers a profound lesson in the slow, agonizing, yet ultimately triumphant march of human ingenuity and resilience against insurmountable odds. For many years, detectives and grieving families faced a seemingly impenetrable wall of obstacles. From the environmental destruction of evidence caused by the corrosive swamp water and intense Texas heat to the rigid, archaic boundaries of jurisdictional silos that prevented law enforcement agencies from connecting the dots across municipal lines. The legal system, bound by strict evidentiary standards, frequently found itself unable to bridge the gap between moral certainty and courtroom conviction, leaving a painful void where formal justice should have stood. Yet, against this backdrop of historical despair, modern science achieved what many once believed was impossible. The revolutionary breakthroughs in genetic genealogy that finally restored the true identities of Audrey Lee Cook and Donna Prudhomme proved beyond a shadow of a doubt that human identity cannot be permanently erased by cruelty, isolation, or time. It demonstrated that the biological blueprint of a person remains an unyielding witness, capable of piercing through decades of historical silence and returning stolen names to those who were cast aside in the dark. This monumental scientific victory redefined the meaning of closure, offering a powerful testament to the fact that dedication and truth can eventually conquer the deepest barriers of the past, rewriting the rules of cold case investigations across the globe for generations to come. Equally vital to this enduring legacy is the extraordinary resilience and proactive advocacy of the families and grassroots organizations that emerged from the darkest ashes of their own grief. The monumental creation of Texas EquiSearch by Tim Miller, driven by the agonizing loss of his daughter Laura, stands as a radiant beacon of human compassion triumphing over despair. By transforming private heartbreak into a highly efficient, nationwide network of civilian volunteers dedicated to searching for missing persons and supporting grieving relatives through their darkest hours, these advocates permanently reshaped the social and institutional landscape. They ensured that future generations of families navigating the nightmarish uncertainty of a missing loved one would never again have to stand entirely alone against bureaucratic inertia or systemic indifference. The emotional and psychological toll borne by these families over decades of waiting is a reality that commands our deepest reverence, reminding us of the lasting weight that unsolved violence extracts from generations. Their refusal to let the memories of the victims fade into obscurity drove a continuous, unyielding demand for truth and accountability, inspiring a higher standard of care and vigilance across modern law enforcement agencies that ensures vulnerable populations are watched over with greater urgency, respect, and protection than ever before in the history of criminal justice reform. As we bring this immersive, comprehensive exploration to its final close, we must ensure that our enduring focus remains fixed squarely upon the profound lessons forged in the shadows of the Interstate 45 corridor. The cultural resonance of the Texas killing fields serves as a permanent, cautionary reminder that a modernizing world must never neglect the margins of its society, and that true safety requires eternal vigilance, open communication between agencies, and a deep, empathetic commitment to protecting the vulnerable. The films, documentaries, and investigative accounts that have brought global attention to League City and Calder Road fulfill a vital purpose, acting as both archival testaments to a dark chapter of history and powerful reminders of our shared moral responsibilities. They ensure that the victims are never forgotten, keeping their stories alive as a guiding light toward a safer and more compassionate world. The tall grass may continue to sway beneath the indifferent Texas sky. The coastal fog will still roll in from the Gulf to blanket the highways, and the relentless march of suburban development will continue to edge closer to the old boundaries of the dumping ground. But the core lessons of this tragedy are permanently etched into the conscience of the nation. We leave this haunting narrative with a heavy heart for the sorrows of the past, an abiding reverence for those who refuse to surrender to despair, and an unwavering commitment to ensuring that the names and stories of the victims remain an eternal beacon of truth and justice in an imperfect world where light must always strive to overcome the deepest dark of human nature. The shadow cast by the Texas killing fields extends across the entire fabric of modern society as a solemn reminder that true justice is not merely a legal verdict delivered within a courtroom, but an ongoing moral obligation embraced by every living person who chooses to remember. The individuals who succumbed to the darkness along the highway did not vanish into total oblivion. Instead, their spirits live on through every scientific breakthrough, every compassionate advocacy effort, and every conscious step society takes to safeguard the vulnerable. As the years stretch onward, and the physical traces of the past continue to fade beneath the changing landscape of South Texas, the enduring echo of their stories stands as an eternal testament to human resilience. It challenges us never to look away from the painful truths of our history, inspiring a collective commitment to empathy, vigilance, and unwavering truth that ensures their bright light will never be completely extinguished by the endless night. We close our broadcast with this profound realization, carrying their memories forward with deep respect, eternal sorrow, and an unshakable dedication to keeping their stories alive in the light of an enduring and unyielding quest for absolute truth and human dignity.